Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku could help Katsuki Bakugo overcome his nightmares 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. It was 4 am. School would start in 3.5 hours. Katsuki Bakugo woke up in a nervous sweat. No, he was soaked between his legs. Was it a damn wet dream? He tried to remember and then didn't want to. He was chained up to a chair. He had been kidnapped by the League of Villains, and the worst part was that it was all real. Suddenly, he was mortified. He had indeed wet the bed. Oh God. His sheets, his mattress. He got up and ran then to the laundry room, where he found Shoto, also running a load. What are you doing here, icy hot? Bakugo asked Todoroki. Todoroki closed the lid of the upright washer and turned the dial, letting the cycle begin. Laundry. With that, he left. Bakugo spent the rest of the school day feeling awkward. He didn't even have time to tease the other students. As soon as the bell rang, Katsuki beelined for his dorm. He went to check and see if his mattress was stained, and he cursed himself to see a small colorless water stain. He didn't know what to do. Burn the mattress. A picture of his family sat on his bedside table. He caused them stress and worry. He thought about everything that he had done to his parents. He was an ass to them, and in his plight to be the best, he was just awful. Katsuki knew it, too. With a primal scream, he hurled the picture frame at the door. Crying was strictly forbidden. He skipped dinner and drank nothing. The plan was to stay up all night, too. Ugh, it was going to be hard. Shoto had been about to knock on Katsuki's door when the picture frame connected to the inside of the frame. Maybe another time. But another time came that evening. Todoroki had been up late, studying. When he passed by Bakugo's room, the door swung open quickly and he had a laundry basket on his hip. Yep, sheets again. Wow, you look awful, Todoroki noted. But the worst part was that it was true. Bakugo frowned. You're in my way. Todoroki stepped aside and kept his eyes on Bakugo, pissing him off. He knows, he thought to himself. There's no way that he would act like this unless he knew. Bakugo shrugged and made his way to the laundry room before heading to the bathroom. Once there, he looked for a stall. He hadn't drunk anything for hours, but if he could force himself to urinate, maybe he wouldn't have another accident. There were no stalls open. He could use a urinal, but what if nothing came out? He'd just stand there like a jackass. Frustration and humiliation raged through his teenaged body, and he aimed to punch the wall between the bathroom mirrors but missed and hit the edge of the glass. The mirror remained whole, but he split his knuckle down the middle. He hissed at the pain and stomped off, left hand holding his right hand, all wrapped in the hem of the tank top. Ice, that's what he needed. He went to raid his mini fridge and cursed to find that he had wasted all of the ice in his drink earlier. What the hell is going on? He screamed before stripping off his shirt and throwing it in the corner of his room. A knock at the door. No, he shouted. Bakugo, came a stern voice. A stern, but tired voice. The teen stalked across his dorm to open the door. Yes, sensei. Aizawa stood in his clothes, clutching the end of his capture weapon, wrapped around his neck. I'd like to talk with you. What could he do? Say no. Of course not. Yes, Mr. Aizawa, he answered. His teacher came in and turned around his desk chair before gesturing for the boy to sit. Bakugo sat on his bare mattress, obediently. I presume you do not know what this is about? Shoto Aizawa asked. Bakugo shook his head and remained silent and studied the ground. After a moment passed, he answered aloud. No, sir. Aizawa nodded. I'll cut to the chase. The staff and fellow students have noticed your behavioral changes over the past few days and following your rescue from the League of Villains. The faculty has come to the conclusion that you are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD for short. This was not a stop, Katsuki interrupted, lifting his head. He was so angry and mortified that he was trembling. I'm not so weak that a simple kidnap and captivity is going to take me down. That's really what you think? Aizawa pressed. Or what you want to believe. He looked at the shattered picture frame set by the bedside. There was still glass on the floor. Bakugo froze. He thought about the nightmares. He wasn't scared while he was captive, but who knows how much adrenaline was in his system at that time. Thinking on it again, was he scared? No, but he felt some sort of horrible survivor's guilt. Why did it have to be him that All Might saved? If there was one person who did not need saving, it was Katsuki Bakugo. Why are you here? Katsuki asked. I'm fine. Aizawa stood. You're missing the point, kid. He cleared his throat. Get some sleep. Bakugo waited until the door closed before he got up to go get his sheets. It was later than he thought. The bathroom was empty. Everyone had brushed their teeth and gone to bed. He kept walking down the hall, deep in his own thoughts. Bakugo, Todoroki said. Ugh, Katsuki exclaimed, stepping back and dropping his laundry basket. What the hell, Todoroki? Shoto raised an eyebrow. What? No cruel nickname. He looked at Bakugo and then at the laundry basket. Laundry again. The anxiety was almost too much for the hot-headed teen. He scowled. Yes, now get out of my way. The laundry room was at the end of the hall to the right. He found that the load had already been shifted from the dryer and neatly folded. Who in the hell touched my sheets? An annoyed Bakugo took the sheets and threw them in his basket before making his way back to his room. It's going to be a long night, he muttered to himself, pushing the door open. He tried so hard, damn it, but he still fell asleep on the bed. Bakugo had played the most dangerous game that sleep could offer, the I'll just rest my eyes for a second game. What it led to was waking up from a foggy nightmare with a sore throat and wet boxers. He punched the mattress, sending his busted knuckle shooting pain up from where it had been split. He cursed, quietly, before hearing a knock on the door. What? He shouted. Another knock. He softened his voice. I'll be right there. He changed his boxers and threw the sheets in the laundry basket, before tossing a towel over the wet spot. Why hadn't he just used a towel under him to begin with? He sighed and opened the door. Hi, Shoto greeted. What do you want? Katsuki asked. You were screaming in your sleep again, Shoto said, bluntly, so that was why his throat hurt. He felt sheepish and darted his eyes down the hall. Well, did anyone else wake up? Not that I know of. Todoroki shrugged. Look, I wanted to give you something to help you out. Help me, icy hot. Bakugo laughed. I don't need your help. If you're tired of laundry, it would probably help. Why don't you let me help, Katsuki? Shoto asked, making direct eye contact. What could be so bad about getting help from someone who gets it? You don't get it. Bakugo scowled. Take it, Todoroki offered, handing over a bag. Whatever. Bakugo frowned, accepting the bag and closing the door on Todoroki's face. He angrily moved across the room to his bed and sat down, legs crossed, avoiding the wet spot. It was a folded mat and 2 folded pads of some sort. A diaper. He threw it at the wall. Enraged, the teen got up from his bed and pulled on some sweatpants. He went to go search for Todoroki, and as he descended the stairs, he peered through the window and found the boy sneaking out of the building, using the door that the cleaning crews used to move trash and cleaning supplies. What the fuck are you doing, icy hot? Bakugo muttered. He followed, swiftly, but paused as he watched Todoroki stretching. Bakugo watched as his classmate lunged to the side, deeply, and moved his arms the opposite direction before bringing his hands to his heart center and moving to the other side. Tai Chi. Bakugo recognized it because his father had tried to teach it to him to calm his mind as a child. Fuck calming his mind and fuck Todoroki. Okay, so you might get it. He relinquished, angrily stalking across the grass. Fucking hell, he grumbled. Todoroki raised an eyebrow but kept on moving through his routine. I told you, I get it. Why? Bakugo demanded. My trauma belongs to me and only me. I don't have to share and I don't expect you to, either. Shoto calmly replied, speaking over his shoulder as he shifted his weight to the other foot and stepped. Katsuki growled. You think you've had it bad, don't you? You think that I'm weak, right? Well, fuck you, Shoto. Watch yourself, was all Todoroki said, as he slowly stopped. He straightened up. It's not a competition. But to Katsuki, everything was a competition. In his mind, if he was going to accept help, it had to be because he was in more need. What? Daddy dearest burned your face. No, that's not what happened, Todoroki replied. He looked up from the grass, where he had formerly been flashing back on the event that happened so many years ago. It was typical that he found himself staring off and waking up moments later, having to tell himself that it's just an old memory. Are you looking for a fight? Always, Bakugo grumbled, cracking his knuckles. It was particularly muggy outside in the moonlit common green. That meant that he was sweatier than usual, not to mention the nightmare sweat. All of that worked to his advantage more to a light from his body. He fired up his right hand. Don't hold back, icy hot. I won't, Todoroki replied, pushing one foot back to brace. He held his arm out and prepared to parry flames and ice with his classmate. But when it came time, nothing happened. Stop, came a voice. How did you get out here? An all too familiar figure walked across the grass. Hair raised, eyes glowing red, and pissed off. It was Aizawa. It is 2:30 in the morning, and I received a report that 2 students had left the building. Tell me, how did you get out? Maintenance exit, Shoto answered, arms at his side, respectfully. Katsuki scowled and raised an arm. I just followed him. Follow me inside. You're both on house arrest. 2 days each, Aizawa said, leading the boys inside. He pressed his ID badge against the front door panel and the boys filed in. Right of the lobby, please. Second door. It was a study room. They sat down across from each other. Aizawa slammed his hands on the end of the table. What in the hell is going on? Both boys jumped. Aizawa made a mental note to maybe not re-traumatize the teens. I offered help to Katsuki, Shoto explained, calmly. His anger is his own. I had no temptation to fight. He insulted me. Katsuki scowled, shoving the table. Stop, Aizawa said in a half-step quieter command. He looked at Todoroki. I offered my solution to him. That's simply my mistake. I attempted to help the unhelpable, 𝐬𝐸𝐽 replied, glaring daggers into Katsuki's eyes. Wait, Bakugo froze. Your solution. You wear diapers. To sleep, Todoroki clarified. I have nightmares, too. Huh. Bakugo laughed. I can believe it. He crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. Aizawa looked on, unimpressed. So you're going to be doing laundry every night then, I see. Bakugo swallowed. You know, Aizawa nodded. The faculty has noticed a lot of changes, particularly mood swings and your nighttime incontinence. It's nothing to be ashamed of. If you want to just launder your sheets every night, that's fine. But I had better not catch you sleeping in class from sleep deprivation. He sighed. That being said, good night. I'm tired. The boys stood and filed out behind him before riding the elevator up to Bakugo's floor. Do you need me to show you how to put them on? Todoroki asked in earnest. Why no, fuck off. I'm not wearing a goddamn diaper. I'm no baby. Bakugo hissed, trying to keep his voice down as the elevator neared his floor. Ding. Katsuki stepped out. You owe me a fight. Remember that. 𝐒𝐸𝐽 replied. Once back on his floor, Bakugo went to switch his laundry to the dryer. Couldn't hurt for one night, he figured, picking up the diaper from off the floor. At least now I won't have to do sheets. It was confusing. One part was supposed to be the front, right? Do you lay down or stand up? Of sit on it and pull it up between your legs. Bakugo looked at his phone. It was nearing 3:30. If he didn't get some sleep, he'd never be able to get to the gym by 5:30. He'd be exhausted. On top of that, his sheets weren't ready. Fuck. Bakugo knew that he would have to ask for help. He ascended one floor and walked down to Shoto's room. Tell me, Katsuki demanded, or I'll kill you. Shoto frowned. Okay. He stepped aside. The entirety of the Todoroki house was traditional Japanese themed. The same was true of his room. Bakugo looked at the framed bed. What? No futon. The bed is so Western looking in here. Shoto shrugged. He lifted the corner of his sheets to show a plastic cover. I can't put a cover on a futon. At least not as easily. He turned back to Bakugo, who was yawning and had eyes that somehow had become even more sunken and tired appearing. He crossed to his closet and pulled out an orange diaper. Here, look, Shoto said. Wait, why is that one colorful? Katsuki asked. Todoroki stepped aside and pulled the door out of view to display the bottom shelf. You can get them in really any color if you want. Bakugo frowned. Then why'd you give me the boring ones? He was petty on a good day, but it was now Shoto's turn to look exhausted. He ignored Katsuki's remarks. These are called tab-style briefs, by the way, not diapers, usually. That being said, look, these sticky tabs go on the back and wrap around front before you pull them off the backing and stick them on the plastic landing zone, which should be snug around your hips. Just lay one down and then center yourself over it with the folded tabs under your lower back and pull the front up between your hips. Then stick it on. You get one shot. This is stupidly complicated, Bakugo said. Whatever. He turned on his heel and balled up his fists. The entire conversation had his cheeks burning bright red and eyes askance. Is this because you want the orange one? Todoroki asked, successfully not laughing. No, Bakugo replied. But I'm taking that one. The boy snatched it off the bed and stuck it under his shirt before taking the elevator down. When he arrived at his room, he realized that Shoto had texted him. Use powder. Bakugo sighed. He didn't have any. Besides, what were the chances that he'd have a nightmare? Surely not. It was time to grab his laundry now, too. Begrudgingly, back in his room, he flattened the diaper onto his fresh bed and made sure the tabs were facing the back before he lay down on them and spread his legs to pull the front up. There, he thought. Now I'm fine. Door is locked. Blinds are drawn. No one needs to know. For a moment, he was anxious, but sleep was too powerful of a force, and he fell asleep not long after he finished sticking down the tabs. When he woke up at 5:54 a.m., from his phone buzzing, he realized that it was not actually his phone. He was the source of the shaking. He was shivering cold, as the sweat began to freeze his body. He turned off the fan and had the warm feeling between his legs. Damn it to hell, he had done it again. He was thankful that he had awoken, however, because it was time to get a shower and hit the gym. 3 days had passed and Bakugo wasn't getting better. He rejected counseling to Aizawa's annoyance and concern. But at least the instructor realized that Katsuki would have to deal with things on his own. His shipment of nighttime tabbed briefs came into the infirmary, and Aizawa had the kindness to drop them off in a paper bag to the students' dorm room after classes. I need to discuss something with you, Shota Aizawa said, sternly. Sit down at your desk and lose the attitude, he warned, in response to the teen's eye roll. But my bed is so much more comfortable, and Bakugo began to argue. Now, Shota ordered. Obediently, the student sat at his desk chair, uncomfortable as it was. He already had to deal with hard chairs in class. He wiggled slightly. Can I just stand? The boy asked. See, Aizawa asked, pointedly. You're moving around. I can see it in class. You're not anxious. You have a rash. Recovery girl supplied you with what you need. There was a moment of silence as Bakugo scowled. His teacher was right, but he felt like it was too humiliating to add powder and cream to his nighttime routine. It would make him smell like baby powder, and he didn't want that. He was no infant. It caught Shota off guard. He could tell that Katsuki had kept counseling on his mind. He hoped that he kept it as a possibility in the future. He couldn't push the teen into facing his traumas, but there was an expectation that the students keep themselves safe, and that means no unnecessary risks. Aizawa dreaded the next bit of the conversation. He knew that Bakugo had to pay the price eventually, but decided that the boy was somehow deserving of a warning. And in addition to not taking care of your rash immediately and letting it get worse, you're projecting your own anger and insecurities onto the others. You are frankly being a bully, Bakugo. You are pushing yourself to work out harder in the gym earlier and earlier. I've seen you come close to sleeping in my class. Therefore, you are banned from the gym for a week. This was not how Katsuki wanted a conversation to go. Whom was his teacher to tell him what to do? No, Bakugo objected. Being in the gym keeps me calm and I need to work out. The exhausted instructor narrowed his eyes. You are this close to getting yourself a spanking, young man, so I suggest you turn it around with the attitude now. He held up his finger and thumb to squish the air and demonstrate how close to corporal punishment Katsuki was. However, when the teen became antsy sitting down for too long on an itchy and sore bottom, the attitude did not stop. He hit the final nerve in the last straw. I'm 15. I can do what I damn want. Bakugo growled in reply. And I have things to do. Aizawa stepped back and reached for the door handle. Do not think that I am going anywhere without you. You know what you have just cost yourself. He spoke. You've earned a spanking. Now get up and put on sweatpants. I will meet you outside the room in 2 minutes. The teacher exited the room and pulled out his phone. He texted Mike. Discipline for Bakugo. We'll have to postpone dinner together, Hisashi. I don't see this one as being easy. Bakugo stepped out in his gym clothes, which was sweatpants and a cotton tank top, black, per usual. The boy followed his teacher across the lawn, on the asphalt, and marched up the stairs onto the second floor where the staff offices were. To his dismay, he watched Aizawa push the key into the lock of his office and turn the handle. The teen was summoned in. Dear Lord, the pouting was driving Aizawa insane. There were few things that annoyed the man to the edge, but pouting teens before deserved punishment was one of them. He was not about to let this kid manipulate him into feeling like he was the bully here. Have a seat, was all Aizawa said. It was eerily quiet in the room as Aizawa unlocked the top drawer of his desk that contained the disciplinary object of dread, the paddle. He opened the drawer and placed the oakwood paddle on the top of the desk before closing the drawer. Bakugo squirmed as little as possible, but having diaper rash was truly miserable. Katsuki Bakugo, Shota Aizawa began. You have not been taking care of yourself, and you have done nothing to support those around you. By that, your bullying has become worse, your temper shorter, as you alone have made the decision to bottle up your feelings. As repercussions for refusing to talk, and for throwing attitude with me and refusing to take care of your physical needs, you will be receiving a spanking. Do you understand me? Bakugo stared blankly forwards, trying not to wiggle. He straightened up. Yes, sensei. At the invitation to stand, Katsuki did so and followed through, picking up the paddle and bringing it to Aizawa, who was sitting on the couch now, receiving and then placing the paddle on the couch side table. I believe Yamada-sensei has straightened you out before, Aizawa asked. Bakugo nodded after a second of scowling. It was a month before the training camp. The teen set fire to a notebook of Midoriya's and threw it out the window. He had received a very long spanking and by the end babbled like a baby. Katsuki refused to talk about it, and Hisashi Yamada was very polite and protective of the boy's discipline-receiving behavior, instead telling Shota Aizawa that the boy was openly remorseful. That will feel like a gentle pat to your rear when I am done, Aizawa promised. Ah, yes, that did it. Finally, the steely resolve of the teen flickered for a second as he winced, thinking about the demise of his bottom, soon-to-be. I'm sorry. It was all that he had to say to lessen the blow, but he just could not will himself to say it. He looked like he was going to throw up, but instead he narrowed his eyes. Do your worst, he almost said, holding words back only so that he didn't start shouting. Aizawa explained the procedure and his expectations. Bakugo nodded. But when the time came for Bakugo to pull his pants down, the boy froze in fear. It was like he was stuck as a little boy again. Hisashi told Shota as they sat and drank tea in the teacher's lounge. Yamada wanted to fill in Aizawa on how Bakugo took the punishments. He acts up in English class too big for his britches, so to say. And then when he has to face a spanking, he just freezes up. I think his parents stopped disciplining him when he got his quirk, around 7 years of age or so. The memory came back to Aizawa, who decided his patience was spent with young teenagers that decided to act like little children, picking on the others, refusing to listen, and throwing angry tantrums. Come here, Aizawa said. He hooked the end of his index and middle fingers into the waistband of the boy's pants and yanked them down. Bakugo sprung back to life. "I can do it myself," he shouted, but he inadvertently grabbed the waistband and pulled them back up. He realized his mistake and recognized that he was screwed. Everything was about to hurt. Submitted, he pulled down his sweatpants and stepped out of them before folding them and placing them on the desk. He was so mad. He wanted to just run away and scream at the pier, a mile away. He thought about bolting, but he had just surrendered his pants. Fuck this. He was going to be a fucking hero. Then he could do anything. It became apparent that Katsuki Bakugo could not do one thing, however. He could not pull his underwear down. He hadn't checked to see what the rash looked like. He didn't have a mirror in his room, and he tried not to look down in the gym showers. He slowly kicked off his sandals. It was really going to happen. "Just come here." Aizawa took pity. "Yes, hands to your sides, please." He yanked the boy's orange and green plaid boxers down to his ankles. "Go put them with your pants," he ordered. The rash itself was exactly where you'd expect a diaper rash to be, and it stayed mostly between the boy's legs, making him walk uncomfortably. He let himself be pulled across Aizawa's lap. Bakugo bit his index knuckle to pacify himself. He was ready for the harsh blow. When it came, he still jumped. And that was where Aizawa-sensei was starting. "You need to take better care of yourself." The instructor lectured as his hand came down with such power. Bakugo thought he'd break down already. He tried to focus on the words and not the pain, but it was hard. He was also really irritated between his legs and thought hard and long on how unfair it was to have his cheeks burn so badly to match everything else that hurt. Everything was going to be red and sore in his diaper tonight. The knot in his throat formed with the first tears. Soon after he had lost himself in thought, he heard his name. Aizawa had paused. "Bakugo, are you listening?" The teen nodded. Aizawa picked back up. "Repeat everything I just said." His swats fell with force. "You can't, can you? Stand up." Bakugo caught another hard sob in his throat and sniffed as he stood up. He really needed to move around to satisfy the annoying burn and itch that plagued him. He was ordered to place his hands on the desk and spread his legs apart. "Bend over," came the order from his teacher, with a hand pushing between his shoulder blades of his tank top, his sole article of clothing on. "I told you to spread your legs, now, didn't I?" Aizawa repeated, annoyed. "Thwack. Og," Bakugo cried out. "Fuck, not so hard. I'm sorry." "Thwack. Silence," Shoto ordered. Katsuki whimpered. "If you responded to my instructions earlier, you wouldn't be here. Now." "Thwack." Katsuki jumped. "Every night, after you complete your homework and are preparing for bed, you will do as appropriate." "Thwack. That means the prescription cream and powder. If people have a solution that works and have offered it to you, you had best considered it." "Thwack. You will keep yourself maintained to your room each and every night. I'm not coming out to find you and Todoroki fighting in the lawn again. Understood?" "Yeah." "Thwack." "Fuck," Katsuki shouted. "Silence." "Thwack. And if you are having unsafe thoughts, you will come directly to me or Mike or All Might, do you understand?" Aizawa paused. He wanted the teen to not just be agreeing for any reason, to ensure that the boy truly knew to come to a staff member if his mental health was declining. "Yes," Bakugo replied, quietly, unable to do anything other than cry. "Thwack. Good. Now go get dressed. It's time for bed." Katsuki wanted to mention that it was still just dusk outside, but he was miserable. Aizawa locked the paddle away in the drawer and pulled the key out. Katsuki was now sobbing on his knees. He had just pulled up his boxers. He scrubbed away the tears on his face with his fists. "Stand up," Aizawa said, softly. He gave the boy a hug. "Are you going to take care of yourself?" "Yes, sensei," Bakugo agreed, though admittedly, he'd have agreed to anything at that point. He was so sore. The instructor helped by handing over the sweatpants to Katsuki and straightening out the coffee table that stood in front of the couch in his office. "Then let's get you to your room and changed. Your classmates are at dinner. Would you like to go there or have something brought to your room?" Bakugo thought. Well, he was so sore he wasn't. Anything else? Hungry, thirsty, even itchy. He was at a terrible kind of peace. He responded, "No, I have protein bars and power drinks in my room. That's what I usually eat in place of breakfast." They walked out into the empty school hallway. "Remember, no gym until you are healed," Aizawa reminded. "You can eat a full breakfast now." "Great," Bakugo griped. Slowly but surely, they made their way to the dorms. "Now about getting changed for bed, go get some sleep. We have training in the morning, and I will excuse you. Go straight to breakfast at 7 and return to class in your school uniform at 8. Sleep well." Bakugo waited until the door closed. "Yeah, sleep well," he repeated angrily in a deep mutter. It was then that his phone went off. It was Shoto. "What?" Bakugo asked, putting the phone to his ear. "Was it bad?" Todoroki asked. Katsuki played dumb. "What?" Shoto had just gotten back from the gym after dinner. His workout was exhausting, and beyond that, he was stressed and in a panic. endeavor, his father, made the news. Shoto hated seeing his father on the news. In fact, he could practically feel his father's disapproval coming through the screen as he answered questions at a press conference. Shoto was deliberating asking for help, a punishable offense in the Todoroki household. He had his phone to his shoulder as he opened the top drawer of the dresser in his closet to take out his nighttime supplies. I saw Aizawa-sensei walking with you to the school building across the grass. He probably also brought up with you the possibility of counseling, right? What about it? Bakugo asked, flatly. He was annoyed. There he was, trying to just relax after getting his ass handed to him, and damn Todoroki just had to interrogate him about everything. He became angrier. Did Todoroki think that 𝐂𝐸𝐲 was going to accept counseling? If so, Shoto probably also thought that Katsuki was weak, that he probably even cried during his spanking. Why bring anything of the matter up? There was a heavy sigh that stemmed far more from trauma-based anxiety than fatigue as Shoto prepared to ask, did you accept it? Did I 𝐒𝐶CEPTIT? No, I didn't accept it, and why do you give a damn? Icy hot, Bakugo asked, now suspicious. Shoto fiddled around with moving his phone from his shoulder to his hand. He spoke low. I wasn't going to accept counseling either. I'm not ready. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to get spanked for rejecting it right now, if that's what I choose. Bakugo laughed. Huh, you're scared of getting punished. No, it takes more than corporal punishment to discipline me, and I refused counseling because it's for babies. Shoto smirked. He wanted to bring up that technically, diapers are for babies, too, and you didn't see him complain about that. Therapy was something that Todoroki needed, however, and just like he needed nighttime briefs, or whatever anyone wanted to call them, just for a bit, he needed therapy maybe just for a little bit, too. Out of his train of thought, Shoto realized that he was still on the phone. Maybe he could convince Bakugo to get help, too. What if we both just think on the idea of talking to someone? It's not like it has to be someone in a suit with a waiting room. We could talk to All Might or another sensei. I just think that it's worth deliberating. An irrational thought occurred to Bakugo. That seemed to be happening more often these days. Paranoia. Was Todoroki trying to get better, so he'd stop wetting the bed and then tell the whole school that 𝐂𝐸𝐲 wore diapers to control his problem? Problem? No, it wasn't a problem. Katsuki Bakugo didn't have problems. Shoto had problems. Yeah, Todoroki still wet the bed because he was weak. And the League of Villains didn't take in Bakugo because he was weak, they chose him. He should be flattered. No sense being scared. Which, of course, he wasn't. He straightened up. There was only one logical way to silence his classmate. I'm coming to kill you, icy hot. I don't have problems like you do. I'm out of your league. Shoto hung up and locked his door. He was already exhausted and stressed, and he didn't want to deal with Bakugo. He knew that he could call Mr. Aizawa, but that was like tattling, and that wasn't something that Shoto really grew up doing. Bother. Shoto sighed as he put away his changing supplies. He could hear Bakugo charging up the steps and coming towards his door. Everyone else could, too, apparently, because the sounds of confusion and doors opening were occurring around the commotion. Katsuki began to bang on Shoto's door. Izuku Midoriya, acquaintance and classmate to Todoroki and unrequited enemy to Bakugo, dialed the helpline from the common room's wall phone to page a staff member. Is there a teacher available? I think Kaken is trying to kill Shoto, Midoriya said, hesitantly. Takoyami even appeared from his dark lair of a room. This is Midnight Sensei. What is going on? Came a serious voice. It was Midnight, the hero that could subdue villains and occasionally rowdy students to sleep. She leaned in and placed a hand over the ear that was not on the phone. She listened to Takoyami call on Dark Shadow to restrain the student. Please hurry. Midnight hung up and leaned back in her chair to check for the number of the on-call dormitory staff member, who happened to be present Mike. She dialed from her cell and turned to get out of her chair. Student paperwork would have to wait for a bit. She broke into a run. Hazashi, it's me. Yeah, 3rd floor. I'm on my way, too. Okay. She hung up and ran across the courtyard of the school to the lawn, where she could see commotion through the window. Fire alarm lights flashed on the stairs and students were descending. Quickly, she pushed through her cabs to sprint into the building and slam her ID card against the sensor before taking the stairs in the opposite direction. She was met with somehow more chaos on the 3rd floor, though less students. Takoyami, unhand him, she ordered. He's lost in it, 𝐒𝐵𝐃𝐸 replied. Regardless, he obeyed and called off Dark Shadow, dumping Bakugo on the floor. Midnight ripped the zipper on her sleeve and let out a pink mist that began to fill the room. Present Mike arrived on the scene, and any students left instinctively covered their ears. He was wearing a mask over his nose but dropped it to shout a piercing scream across the floor, bass booming across the windows but not shattering them, before putting it back on. Bakugo was holding his breath, writhing on the floor in pain from the sound. Midnight placed a hand on his back, and he fell asleep. Mike cleared for Todoroki to open the door when the mist had been inhaled by everyone and inevitably dissipated. Shoto opened the door slowly and stepped out, looking at the crack in the charred, thick wood. Well, this has been fun, Aizawa said, walking in through the elevator's threshold in civilian clothes, holding a cup of coffee. Same time next week. Shoto turned his back and walked into his room, closing it on the commotion and the teachers. Mike looked at his partner, Katsuki limp in his arms, and Aizawa sighed. I'll talk to Todoroki. You get him to bed, please. Midnight went down the elevator to meet with the students, waiting outside and disarm the emergency system. She turned off the awful siren with a code in a box in the lobby and invited the last 18 students into the first-floor common room. What happened? Kirishima asked, concerned. Bakugo went nuts. Denki muttered. Silence. Midnight Sensei ordered. There will be a time to talk about this, preferably not at 9 p.m. on a school night. There was a whoosh sound as the automatic glass doors opened in the lobby, and all heads turned to see All Might appear with his arm still in a cast. Hitoshi Shinso in tow, the freshman boy from general education. His quirk was hypnosis. All Might, Midnight greeted. All Might nodded before looking at Hitoshi. Can you do it? The boy nodded. Good evening, everyone. The group all muttered highs and good evenings back. Forget this and go to your dorms. Wake up normal, he commanded before looking at the teachers. Can I go back now? We're playing Uno. All Might laughed and clapped the boy on the back. Yes, very good, Hitoshi. Go get some sleep, too. And thank you, Midnight said. She watched as the hero teacher and pupil left and the doors whooshed closed behind them. Back on the third floor, Midnight found Todoroki's room, where the student was sitting on his bed across from Aizawa and Yamada. She leaned in the doorway and gently knocked. He looked up, tearfully for a brief second to see who it was before he politely nodded for her to enter. She stood with the other pro teachers. You sure you want to start tomorrow? Mike asked Shoto. The boy nodded. I just didn't want to start alone. He shrugged. No clue what set off Katsuki, still, he informed. I'm just too scared to sleep. Can I go for a walk? No, Aizawa shut down. But get changed and prepare yourself for bed. I have to check on something. Mike put a hand on Todoroki's shoulder. We are proud of you. Is my father going to have to know I'm receiving counseling? Midnight shook her head, as did Present Mike. It's confidential unless you talk about hurting yourself. Then we have to tell authorities and your parents. She spoke. Todoroki nodded once more and stood. He declared that he had to change before bed. Good night. Thank you for taking care of me. He bowed to his teachers. They bowed back in respect of the teen and left. Downstairs, Aizawa exited Bakugo's room. Is he changed? Yamada asked. His partner nodded. I had to rouse him to get him to change into his. He dropped off for privacy, as they were in the common area outside of the rooms. Mike and Midnight nodded as well. Well, I bid you all a good night. See you all tomorrow. It's a late night for me, Midnight said. In fact, I'll be up until morning doing the paperwork for this. I can help. Hizashi offered. Aizawa tossed his coffee cup. Worst break ever. Babe, can't we just go to bed? You know, like normal people. Midnight laughed. You two sleep well, I'll inform Nezu. They collectively sighed. Luong night, indeed. A sharp whistle blew, and the students of Wana took off of the outdoor rubber track. Today's training was just to see where they stood after the quirk training camp. They were supposed to be tested there, but Bakugo's abduction and villain attack kind of quelled that. 2 students were missing, however, Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki, and for good reason. They both suffered from the effects of post-traumatic stress, but they were in different stages of acceptance. For instance, Shoto was attending his first therapy session, talking things through with his English teacher, pro hero Present Mike, also known as Hizashi Yamada or Yamada-sensei to the students. Bakugo, meanwhile, was under close watch by All Might, who had just had his arm taken out of the cast and sling. Why do you have to watch me? The teen griped. Because you are suspended. All Might responded, frankly, to Bakugo's repeated question. He was sitting in an empty classroom, watched and surveyed by the former #1 pro hero, and he was miserable. Yeah, but, why does it have to be you? It won't be forever, or even all day. You see, young Bakugo, I am the on-call staff for the dorms. I will be patrolling. I don't have time to watch you. That relieved the teenager. Well, I don't need a damn sitter. Why can't you leave me alone now? All Might frowned. I think you misunderstand. You will be watched 24/7, one-on-one. 2 weeks. I just switch out with Yamada-sensei after school hours. Bakugo punched the desk. He scowled at All Might, looking for a reaction. He received none. Let's go for a walk, All Might suggested. You're wiggling in your seat, still. I don't want to. Bakugo frowned. Okay, then let's talk. All Might more or less ordered. What got into you last night? There was silence as Katsuki tried to stare down his idol. Again, he received no reaction. It bothered him. He finally talked more like he finally muttered. Dunno. All Might leaned forward at the desk. I find that hard to believe. You can't say you know anything. For a minute or two, Bakugo stared at his classmates, testing on the field, before he finally answered. He looked at All Might. Can you promise to keep it a secret? He asked in earnest. Of course. All Might nodded. The teen took a breath. Ever since you had to save me and subsequently retire, I feel that everyone is out to get me. I have no one to trust. I want to be a hero more than anything, sure. But even with my drive to be the goddamn best, the League of Villains still saw me as potential for a pawn of evil. Last night, I thought that Todoroki was asking me about my rejection of counseling because he wanted to get better and frame me to be weak. He looked at All Might. I'm not weak. You have proven that 1,000,000 times over. All Might assured. Fear not for that. As far as Todoroki and what he has going on, it doesn't affect you, and likewise, you shouldn't affect him and his treatment. The bell rang. Class in 5. Bakugo sighed. It hurt to sit on his bottom. All Might stood. I'll take you to meet your classmates downstairs, he began. And young Bakugo, hm. Bakugo reacted in curiosity. You don't need to worry about what counseling is like. It would be almost exactly like this. That got Katsuki thinking. If Shoto was facing his demons, why couldn't he face his own? Time to dwell on that would have to wait, however, because his fellow students would be coming through the downstairs locker rooms soon. Bakugo waited outside the gym. Class 1 didn't use the indoor gym too often. For the most part, they trained outside because of the nature of their quirks. Physical education was required like most high schools in Japan, and so indoor facilities were reserved for the business and support students. Shoto came out with the rest of the students, thoroughly confusing Katsuki, who knew that he was in therapy. Bakugo had nothing to say to his classmate, but was still annoyed that he had been ignored. If last night really happened, why did no one say anything about it? A nightmare. No, All Might knew. Bakugo ignored the other students greeting him and asking where he had been and ran to catch up to Todoroki. He sidled up to him, after telling Ida to fuck off for ordering him to walk like the others. Shoto, tell me what happened last night, Katsuki ordered. I don't think you want to know, Shoto replied, shouldering his bag. He changed the subject. I hear you're on suspension. Bakugo frowned. Yeah, was all he wanted to say, but he followed it up with his concern about Present Mike being his monitor until nighttime. He just prayed that Aizawa wasn't watching him at night. After all of the students were dismissed, Bakugo waited back. He scowled at his teacher and waited for him to notice. Aizawa knew the boy was throwing attitude, but frankly did not care much. Mike-sensei appeared in the hallway and Bakugo stood. Dinner is at 6. Be there and don't cause any trouble for Yamada-sensei, please, Shota Aizawa warned. Bakugo's glare increased. Fine, as long as it's not you. Testy, are we? Present Mike sighed. What do you want to do? He asked as they headed for the dorms. They made an agreement that Mike would do his best to not make it obvious that Bakugo was on watch, but no steadfast promises were made. If you try and do something stupid, there will be repercussions. I don't expect anything of the sort, however. I'm sure you will behave, Hazashi said, more or less just hoping rather than believing the boy's capabilities for obedience. I want to go to the gym, Bakugo said. He looked at his instructor's face as he was about to speak. Bakugo went back to scowling at the grass. I know, off limits, he sighed. Then I'm going to my room. In the meantime, Aizawa moved to the staff dorm suite that he shared with his husband. Mike and Aizawa had 2 rooms across for each other with a sitting area in between. They decided to move into one room and use the other as an office that they could use and still stay in the dorm. He thought that he would hate it, but as it turned out, UA had a nicer staff housing situation than the downtown Tokyo apartment the two had shared before. Shota went to take a nap. He was on Bakugo's night watch, anyways. The day passed too slowly for Bakugo. He felt like he was grounded, which he kinda was. When dinner time came, Katsuki heard a knock on his door. He opened it to find Shoto. Can I come in? He asked. No, Katsuki said, closing the door in his face. The visitor knocked again. May I come in? Bakugo sighed. Fine. He stepped aside. But why? Todoroki handed him instant noodles and chopsticks. Because we need to talk. Shoto nodded to sitter on call, Hazashi Yamada. What do we so badly need to talk about? Bakugo asked, accepting the ramen with the slightest and pettiest bow in all of Japan. I think you should know what happened last night, Todoroki admitted. I just didn't want to tell you at school in case that part of you woke up again. Bakugo had only one desk chair and Mike offered it up, but the boys agreed to just sit cross-legged on the floor. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. What do you mean part of me waking up? Todoroki shrugged. There's a part of me that gets activated when I'm stressed or triggered. It's fight or flight. Bakugo snorted. Well, I have no flight instinct. It's only fights for me, he said, jamming his pointed thumb against his chest. Proudly, Shoto sipped his broth from the plastic bowl. Right, sure, Shoto said, amused. That elicited an immediate frown from Katsuki. Shoto continued. I offered for you to start therapy at the same time as me. That was it. I don't know what set you off. You may think that you don't need it. I'm here to tell you that you do. And it's going to take time and suck. Only a coward would avoid it. Are you a coward? He knew that he was playing with fire here. Testing Bakugo never went well, but it wasn't like his classmate could straight up attack him with Yamada in the room. Katsuki was back to his defensive self for a second. Okay, icy hot. I'll talk, but only to prove that I don't need it. Give it 3 sessions. Promise me. Todoroki dared. Fine, Bakugo agreed. He looked down at his classmate's outstretched hand and shook. Now you have to do me a favor, he returned. Shoto raised an eyebrow. Katsuki lowered his voice. How do I get rid of a rash? Shoto leaned back. You actually have to use the cream instead of throwing it out in my trash can. Mike didn't seem to care about the exchange of secrets. Bakugo frowned and leaned back. Fine. After Todoroki left, Aizawa came in to relieve Yamada. Bakugo stood up. You? Yes. Aizawa frowned, taking a clipboard from his husband. No, Bakugo shouted. He could feel the panic rising in his chest. The thoughts came racing. You couldn't even keep me safe. Isn't that your job? You are the one who disciplines me. You are the reason I got a spanking. You are going to fall asleep and I am going to get taken again. Actually, scratch that. I dare the villains to come after me again. I dare them to find me. I will find them instead. Yes, tonight. I'll kill them. Calm your breathing, Aizawa ordered as he checked his phone. He slipped it back into his pocket. Bakugo didn't, and his instructor looked at the student. Now, you're having racing thoughts. The teen didn't notice, but Shota did the quick flicker to the doorknob and then the window. He was looking to run away. His body language also changed to the defensive fists balled up and knees bent, dominant leg forward. He was sweating. Aizawa sighed. Stop it now. He put in eye drops as he talked and made sure to erase the boy's quirk. Bakugo felt his power drain and felt weaker. He shook himself out of it. What happened? He asked. You were having a trauma episode. Probably racing thoughts, too, Aizawa answered in earnest. He watched as his student sat down on the side of his bed. He also watched, to his annoyance, that Katsuki was still sitting uncomfortably. Where's your prescription that recovery girl filled for you? You should be able to sit better by now. Katsuki crossed his ankles and folded his hands in his lap, pouting. He looked away. I dunno. Aizawa's eyes glowed red. Don't you dare lie to me. Bakugo felt his heart racing again. He looked from the window to the door. I said that I don't know. I can't find it. There was another knock at the door. Katsuki welcomed the invitation to avoid the conversation and found no one there. Outside his door, wrapped in paper, was what he opened to find the medicated cream. Todoroki's back entering the elevator. And what do we have here? Aizawa asked as Katsuki looked down at the unwrapped tube. Someone must have found it. Katsuki shrugged. And how would they know it to be yours? The instructor asked. Shit. Bakugo could have just told the truth a few minutes ago and not have dug himself into this hole, but alas, he did not. Now he was going to have to keep lying. Or tell the truth. He decided to submit and do the latter. I didn't want it, and so last night while everything was happening, I threw it out into Shoto's trash, the bin right inside the door. He stared at his unimpressed teacher, even more annoyed now somehow that he wasn't being chastised or getting a reaction. And I'm not sorry. I think it's stupid that I can't just do laundry instead. You were sleeping in my class. Absolutely not. You're on thin ice, Bakugo. Lie again and you're getting a spanking. Now, go brush your teeth, get some homework done, and get changed for bed. With a heavy frown, the student grabbed a small, zippered pouch with toothpaste, a toothbrush, and some shampoo. I'm taking a shower, he announced. Aizawa more or less agreed. After getting ready for bed and doing an hour of homework, Bakugo became tired, but refused to give in to sleep. It was nearing late into the night and Aizawa looked up from his phone quickly when he heard a thump. He whipped his head over to the right to see his most troublesome student lifting his head, looking surprised. You slammed your head into the desk, falling asleep. Shota frowned. Just like in class. Get changed and go to bed. Bakugo pushed his chair back and took his phone off of the charger. He went to lay down on his bed and turned the brightness up on the phone, hoping to keep himself awake. After a few minutes, Aizawa-sensei turned off the light and opened the top drawer of the student's dresser, where his changing supplies were kept. Now, he ordered. No, Bakugo said, somewhat sounding like a question. Katsuki Bakugo. Aizawa full-named, feeling a headache coming on. Stand up. What? The boy asked, suddenly realizing his ass was on the line. We're going to the clinic, Aizawa threatened, grabbing the doorknob. Why? Katsuki panicked. The instructor continued. Well, you are obviously inept at changing yourself, so recovery girl can do it. She is a nurse. Now Bakugo was standing, but backed against the wall. I'll behave, he stuttered. Good. Aizawa sighed and let go of the doorknob. He pulled out the chair. When I'm done with you, I'm positive you will. Eyes flickered to the window and then the door and then the window and then the door and then straight to his perturbed instructor's eye. Katsuki looked to see that his upper arm had been seized and he was being towed to the desk chair. He was in boxers and a t-shirt. Not much protection. It didn't matter much though, because pretty soon the boxers were yanked to his knees and he was bent over Aizawa-sensei's lap. 10 heavy swats delivered. He gasped for air at the start and when he stood up, his bottom lip quivered in humiliation. Now get changed. I'm standing in front of the door and will be watching the window." It took a second for the boy to pull himself together before he pulled out a diaper from the drawer, himself, along with the medicated cream and powder. He changed, slowly and awkwardly, unsure of how to do it with added steps. Once he taped up, he propped himself up onto his hands and swung his legs off the bed to pull on the boxers he was wearing previously, over the diaper. "I'm done," Bakugo announced, tamely. "Sorry." Aizawa checked his watch. It was close to 1 in the morning now. Saturday. Thank God. The weekend. Wordlessly, he crossed the room and pulled down the covers, allowing the student to crawl in before pulling them back over. "Good night," Aizawa said, sternly. He was exhausted and crossed back to the other side of the room to grab the desk chair and bring it across from the bed. He had papers to grade and asked if Mike would drop off his laptop to the room via text. He waited for a reply, but it took a while, as Hisashi was busy doing rounds until about 2. At 3, however, he was back. Aizawa could not calm the thrashing boy as he was haunted in his nightmare. He kept muttering and whimpering. It was a sad sight and far from what the instructor was used to as far as the great self-proclaimed Lord Explosion Murder came. Yamada entered the room after a knock. Aizawa's hair was raised as he erased the boy's potential quirk usage. He turned and broke the erasure for a moment to make sure it wasn't a student barging in. As expected, it was his husband. "It's been a few minutes of this," Shota filled in. Mike mirrored the concern on his lover's face before it switched to just solemn. "I should have gone on that trip. Maybe prevented this. It was unfair to you and Vlad." Eraserhead collapsed in the chair and closed his eyes for a brief second. No, it was my fault. These are my kids. He's been under my care from the moment he passed that entrance exam." They turned back to see Bakugo wake suddenly. He wiped away tears that lightly stained the corners of his eyes. Scared, vulnerable, tired, and confused, he shied away from his teachers in terror. It took his a second to realize what was going on. Finally, he looked down and his face was flushed in mortification. He had done it again. He wasn't able to wake up soon enough. He sat up, uncomfortably. "Are you wet?" Aizawa asked, frankly. Bakugo appreciated not being babied, but he was beyond embarrassed, still. "No," he lied, shifting uncomfortably. Aizawa stood. "Katsuki, Bakugo, if you're lying," Yamada took over. "Would you rather one of us leave so you can change?" Bakugo scowled. He knew not how to handle his emotions and instead flipped over onto his stomach and threw a pillow over his head, lacing his fingers together over it so it could not be removed, and shouted muffled, "It's fine." The teachers and staff took a seminar on supporting students with trauma-informed teaching. It was the only way that they could deal with the happenings of this year. Surprisingly, Midnight Sensei was the best at working with the teens. Of course, the staff had hardly thought that they would need to use their licensing as much as they had for Class 1A, whom had been at the center of multiple attacks and disasters. For now, Aizawa and Yamada were at the understanding that trauma can revert the age display of a victim, and Katsuki's tantrum was to be handled with care, but not completely tolerated. He had to act his age. 2 pro-heroes were at a standstill against the young aspiring teen. They decided on an ultimatum. "Bakugo, listen to me now," Aizawa ordered. "I'm leaving to get my paddle from my office. You have until I get back to obey Mike Sensei, or you can return to the office with me and the paddle and get a spanking." Again, the teachers had already agreed that while effective, they didn't want to keep using the same tactics on the boy. Sparing the rod wasn't necessarily spoiling the child, if they were able to supplement the spared rod with other discipline tactics. Aizawa left and let the door latch closed behind him as he walked towards the elevator. It was about a 5-minute walk to the school and 5 minutes back to the dorm. He had to be smart, however. He couldn't just walk back in the dark with a paddle in hand. That had removed the privacy factor for Katsuki. When he arrived, he grabbed a canvas messenger bag and packed away anything he might need to work on back at the dorms along with the discipline instrument. In the meantime, Yamada was getting Bakugo to sit up and look at him. The boy did so, lazily. "I'm not tired," Katsuki lied. He was, in truth, so exhausted he wasn't sure if he was asked a question. He was not. Hisashi pulled the chair back around to the side of the bed and looked at Bakugo. "Are you going to talk to me and tell me the truth, or are you going to bullshit me?" he asked, voice down low. "Because if you want to lie like a little kid, you'll get punished like one," Yamada reasoned. He sat back. "That being said, I am going to ask you a final time, are you wet?" As the boy prepared to answer, the door opened. He looked at the corner of the room, suddenly hyper-focused on the carpet. "Yeah," he said. "Thank you for your honesty." Mike Sensei thanked before ordering the boy to change into a fresh diaper and return to sleep. When breakfast time came, Katsuki was expected to appear in the cafeteria with his peers, but he did not want to. It was nearing the end of Aizawa's shift and he lucked out, it being so that he had a whole day to sleep. He was wearing thin on patience. The staff had ultimately decided that in light of Katsuki's struggles behaving and the nightmares, he would be entered into counseling regardless. Choosing who was another battle. It had to be someone who he could trust but not too close to him. That ruled out All Might and Eraserhead. Present Mike was the alternate choice, but Midnight became the official counselor. Now it was 6:30 in the morning and time for the shift change. Aizawa handed off a clipboard with notes on Bakugo's night, along with All Might and Mike's notes. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 was Midnight's civilian name. That was how Shota typically greeted her, by her birth name. But in front of the students, he tended to keep the super name as a form of respect to show students that she had already received the title of hero. He asked 𝗂𝐵 for a moment alone with the boy before her re-entered the room and cleared his throat. "Midnight Sensei is here. Get up, get dressed." Bakugo grumbled under the covers that he was tired. Aizawa didn't want to hear it. He ripped off the covers and left the boy hissing at the light. 5 more minutes, Katsuki demanded, glaring with one squinted eye. 5 more minutes and Midnight Sensei will be in here. My shift is up. Now you can be good and change, or I can flip you over my knee. That got the boy's attention. "I'm up," he said, bolting upright to a seated position. He slid off his bed and went to fetch some fresh clothes while Aizawa was turned around for privacy's sake. Bakugo got changed. "I'm skipping breakfast," he announced. "I'm going to the gym." "No, you're not. No, you're not," Shota said, turning back around. "Breakfast is at 7 and your first session is at 8. The teen stopped combing his hair upwards. He made a fist and set alight a spark. "What did you say?" he asked, fuming. "You decided without me. The teachers and your parents, Katsuki," Aizawa said, hardly ever using the boy's first name. "Now, go brush your teeth. Midnight is here. Be good or you're dealing with me." Bakugo ate in silence across from Todoroki. He had mentioned that he was going to counseling, and Shoto had offered a quick few words of advice, to which Katsuki responded with, "Get fucked." Todoroki took the hint and they consumed rice with eggs, peacefully. "Ready?" 𝗂𝐵 asked. "Yes, Midnight Sensei," Bakugo said, standing up and taking his tray, bowl, and chopsticks over to the return atop the trash cans before he followed her out. "We're going to my office," she said, hinting for him to follow. He did, but the closer they got to the staff hallway, the slower he walked until she had to stop to check in on him. "We're just getting acquainted today," she said. "You've got this." The office was a few doors past Aizawa's, and he worried that she heard his pathetic cries from getting his butt paddled on Wednesday. Regardless, he followed at a quicker speed and waited for the jingle of keys to unlock her door before he tentatively stepped in. She gestured for him to sit on the couch across from an armchair. "Do you hit kids, too?" Bakugo asked, looking around. She laughed lightly, caught off guard by the phrasing. "I'm not a disciplinarian for the girls, no. I don't handle that. I'm not a homeroom teacher or a supplemental teacher. I'm mostly paperwork and the 2 classes you have with me for your grade. You report to Aizawa and Yamada senseis though, right?" Bakugo shifted uncomfortably, thinking of the spankings and remembering that the diaper rash was still there since he forced himself to sit in a wet diaper for an hour longer than necessary from his own stubbornness. 𝗵𝗲 ignored the wiggle and instead sat back in the chair and clicked a pen on a pad of paper. "Why don't you tell me a little bit about your relationships with your teachers and classmates?" she began. Relief. She didn't press any really hard questions to start. In fact, he could lie his ass off easily and avoid getting into anything serious. He talked a little about Kirishima and some about Kaminari. Then things got heavy when she shifted to asking about the bullying allegations and asking if he had a need for a sense of power. So much for easy questions. His pulse began to rise, rapidly. Bakugo's eyes darted from the pen and paper to the clock to the door. "Can I leave?" Bakugo asked. "Unfortunately, not until 9. She responded. 9? That was, like, 30 minutes away. No, he had to go and he had to go now. Without a single thought in his head other than to go, Katsuki shot up, threw open the lock, and bolted out the door. He felt the muscles in his legs screaming, and suddenly it was as though he had never seen the school's layout before in his life. He was tired and woozy out of seemingly nowhere. The air in his nostrils smelled sweet and he pinched his nose under his shirt collar. She was close to him and using her quirk to subdue him, or she had done it while he was trying to escape. Could she have been that fast? Stairs. There. He could go blow off some steam somewhere. Somewhere in town away from the school. It was a Saturday. He could probably go wherever he wanted, right? With that horrible idea, he went out of the school gates, zooming towards the dorms, intending to blow past them, and take a run towards his old neighborhood park. It was about a 2-mile run. Midnight had ripped her sleeve. The boy had inhaled enough he should get tired. And soon, she called on a walkie to the on-call staff. Who was All Might? Realistically, Toshinori could not run that fast. Keep an eye on the kid, sure, but catch him? That was a whole other kettle of fish. Luckily, Hisashi was unsuccessfully taking a nap beside his husband, Shota, when he saw 𝗵𝗲 run past. All Might was on the phone, calling someone else, probably 𝗵𝗲𝗄 or 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Hisashi slipped out of the bed, wrist seized by Aizawa, one eye open. "Where are you going?" Yamada gently removed the hand and tied his hair back. "Young Bakugo just ran past. I'm going to fetch him." Aizawa got up. Yamada pushed his shoulders lightly and guided him back onto the bed. "Get some sleep, love. I'll be back." By the time Mike made it out into the streets, midnight was running past the dorms. She had made a 5-minute walk from her office to the dorms in less than 2 minutes. You go left, I'll go right, she ordered Mike. He nodded and they split up. Bakugo made it to the park, ever more tired. He found a place to hide under a bridge at the park and cursed the fact that he knew Midnight's mist had gotten through his system. The faster he ran and higher his pulse, the more active it became. Delusional and overconfident in his hiding spot, he decided to camp out for a few minutes and set a timer on his watch to wake him up in 5 minutes. It was 𝗧𝗵𝗲 who found him. The instructor had multiplied himself 10 times over and searched the area with the rest of the party. When they found Katsuki, Midnight doused him up and they carried him back. The students had been away from the conflict, but word traveled quickly that Bakugo had run away. When they found him, the Wana students were sent to their rooms for the bit it took to bring a sleeping Katsuki to the clinic. Sleep did not come to Aizawa, however, as he felt entirely responsible for Bakugo's well-being, and he had been waiting in the clinic and on the phone with Mr. and Mrs. Bakugo on behalf of Katsuki's behavior. He talked about sending him to a partial hospitalization program, which everyone agreed would probably be terrible. Aizawa filled them in on the nightmares, but out of respect and the maintaining of self-dignity, did not mention their solutions to bedwetting. Overall, Katsuki was on 2 out of 3 strikes. If he failed to rein in his behavior one more time, he was expelled for his own sanity. Katsuki awoke to the familiar warmth spreading across his legs and sat upright with a shout of surprise. He found that he was being watched by multiple teachers, and knowing that he had just pissed himself was humiliating. He couldn't get up and fight anyone, and they would all know soon enough. Watching him was Snipe and Midnight, Eraserhead and Present Mike. All Might was standing in the doorframe. Recovery Girl, however, was hobbling up to the side of the bed and shooing everyone away so that she could change the bed. Was this his punishment? Humiliation? He felt his face burn red, but he was so exhausted that he could barely hold himself up on his arms. Recovery Girl convinced the boy to relax and made the necessary changes. Now, Katsuki, she began, I can take off the heavy sleep effects and it will cure your rash to some degree, but it will make you very tired. Still, there are some people who would like to talk to you. Bakugo tightened the fresh sheet around him and sat up. Recovery Girl handed him a sweet cherry-flavored lozenge and he thanked her quietly and sucked on it, feeling the fatigue be replaced with a more natural sense of exhaustion. Who is coming to talk to me? Bakugo asked. But no sooner had he asked than did Principal Nezu appear, riding in Aizawa's scarf. Ah, young Bakugo, you're awake. What a relief. Nezu smiled, climbing down from Aizawa's shoulder and jumping up onto a chair at the end of the bed. Aizawa took a seat. Good afternoon, Principal Nezu, Bakugo greeted, nervously. Ah, good evening, indeed, Nezu politely corrected. It seemed that I would be working overtime due to your little exploration. These dorms are here to keep you safe. No, I'm sure you would like to return to your room, but that all depends on if you can have a bit of a chat with me. Nezu rambled. Bakugo sat back up, pulling the sheets up and then scooching his bottom up further back on the bedwetting mat. It was dry, so he must have used the pan successfully. What he once considered horrible was now very appealing. He would do almost anything to get back in a diaper and go the fuck to sleep. But no, he just had to run off and get himself into trouble. Nezu explained that the offenses were rather overlooked with leniency, as the school felt responsible for Katsuki's abduction, but the staff was growing weary. We would hate to expel a top student for mental health, but if you don't shape up, I'm afraid the staff and your parents, after meeting with us over the computer, have voted to place you in partial hospitalization. It was at this moment that Bakugo knew he fucked up. No longer tired, the boy sat up, eyes wide. No, you can't. I can't go into a damn hospital. I won't. Shoto leaned back in the chair. I think you misunderstand. You would be there for the daytime and return to the dorms at night. It doesn't have to be this way. However, of course, the condition is that you shape up, behave yourself and take care of yourself. You have one more strike. It was Nezu's turn to speak and he explained more about the options young Bakugo had. But the boy was too stressed to actually listen. When there was a silence in the room, he looked at the instructors. So what do I have to do? He asked. Counseling twice a week, Aizawa answered, and corporal punishment will still be used as it is to keep any student in line. Bakugo frowned before whining. Can't I skip the paddling? Nezu looked down at the boy with regret before sighing. Actually, a few pops to your rear was your parents' idea. Would you like to call them and tell them you are awake? No, Bakugo said. I just want to go to my room and change and finish my homework. Can my spanking wait? For now, Aizawa said, standing up, Nezu on his shoulder. Although Bakugo didn't want to talk to anyone, it's not like he wanted to be alone. He knocked on Shoto's replaced door. Todoroki opened up and stepped back, allowing for Bakugo in, but Mike-sensei had to be in the room. Are you changed? Katsuki asked, casually, as he went to go take a seat by Shoto's floor desk. Todoroki rolled down the waistband on his pajamas to show a white diaper tab. Yes, he answered. Do you want some tea? Bakugo agreed and thanked his friend before a moment of silence. He squinted and stared for a second. Why isn't it visible? He asked. Wow, the briefs, Todoroki realized. I keep them really snug to me. You can't really tell unless I've had an accident. When they're dry, it's not like there is a ton of extra padding. He stirred in a scoop of tea leaves to the pot and allowed it to steep. You're probably so self-conscious that you don't realize it's not that drastically different from regular brief. There was silence for a moment as Bakugo looked out the window. I have to go to counseling, he griped. Twice a week, and I get a spanking. Shoto didn't mean to laugh, but he did, lightly. Katsuki whipped his head around. Todoroki apologized. Sorry. He cleared his throat. I mean, are they so terrible? Bakugo clenched his fist for a second. You must not have had one in a while. When you do, you'll remember. Todoroki was quiet for a minute. Bakugo nudged. Shoto made an uncomfortable face. To be honest, he looked at Present Mike, who was grading papers off of a clipboard in the corner of the room. Shoto nodded over in that direction. When we heard you ran away, like the class heard and saw, I freaked out and wouldn't go to my room. So Yamada-sensei took me to the school and popped me twice. Bakugo looked stunned. So, I'm not the only one. I sweat to G. No, Todoroki said, eyes wide, shaking his head. Yeah, it sucks. But no, there's been a lot of spankings and groundings. Half of the class is grounded for the weekend. Why? Katsuki asked. Well, we wanted to help find you and then we were sent to our rooms. But Hisashi cleared his throat and spoke softly. What did we agree to, my little listener? To let Midnight Sensei fill in Katsuki and not to talk about what happened while it's still upsetting. Shoto repeated. A knock sounded at the door, and it was Aizawa. Mike checked his watch. I wondered where Bakugo was. It's your bedtime, Shota announced, looking at the boy. Bakugo thanked Todoroki for the tea and followed Aizawa and Mike to the elevators. I will wait with you until All Might arrives. He is watching you tonight. You need to get changed. The elevator reached the floor and Katsuki stepped out. Yeah, I know. Hisashi looked at Shota and pointed. Did he just agree? Hisashi asked, stunned, like, without even fighting. Aizawa smirked into his capture weapon. They stepped out and Present Mike sighed. Katsuki, Bakugo just took an order. 10 more minutes and we'll be in bed. Shota, Aizawa declared, looking at his watch. All Might was already holding onto his clipboard and coming up the stairs. He greeted his coworker. Many thanks. Are you ready for no sleep, Tashinori? All Might shrugged. I get tomorrow off, so I should be good for Monday. The door handle moved a bit and Bakugo opened up the door the tiniest bit. I'm changed, he said, flatly, looking away at the floor. Thank you for the second chance, senseis, Katsuki added, though mostly mumbling. The couple left All Might with young Bakugo after replying to the thanks, politely. They decided to take the stairs to their floor. Soon enough, with 2 minutes to spare, Hisashi and Shota were in bed. Hisashi reached over to turn off the light, hair tied up on his head, neatly. Bakugo seemed really well behaved today. Aizawa was already mostly asleep. His mouth still tasted like mouthwash. Well, yes, because I'm handing him his ass tomorrow. Bakugo had been asleep for a while now. The dreams were getting crazier. He had taken a habit of trying to remember everything he could, so when he woke up, he could detail everything into a notebook titled Nightmares. It was in nightmares that he remembered the things that the villains had said to him about how they were going to reform society, and ways that they would hurt and kill his classmates. He knew from the fogginess and inability to run that he was trapped in a dream. He could feel the fear welling up in his body and tried to wake himself up. Nothing was working. Finally, a hand touched his shoulder. It was All Might in the real world, and it was time to wake up for breakfast. The alarm clock by Katsuki's bed happily chirped that it was, indeed, 7 a.m. His teacher pressed the silencing button atop it and cleared his throat. You were, screaming, young Bakugo. Is everything all right? The boy grabbed his notebook from under his pillow and then searched for the pen that he had slipped under the pillow with it. Yeah, I'm fine. He lied. When he found the pen, he uncapped it and started writing down everything he could remember, including some drawings. Tashinori was busy dealing with someone at the door. It was Aizawa and Kayama-sensei. All Might said his goodbyes and Bakugo merely muttered and looked up for a second to say his own farewell. Nimuri and Shota stood at the doorway for a second, calling out to the teen, who was slick with sweat and shaking with adrenaline. His mouth tasted like salt, and that's when it came to his attention that he had chewed through the very edge of his lip. A hand waved in front of his face and covered the spot of nightmares that he was working on, or rather scribbling on a torn page. Judas, kid, stub. Aizawa cursed under his breath. It was now just him and Bakugo. He snapped and activated his quirk, in the anticipation that Bakugo would fight back when he came back from his dissociation. Arg! Katsuki jumped. He went to grab Aizawa's throat, but his hand was caught. Where was I? What's this book? Aizawa asked, confiscating nightmares. That's mine, Bakugo yelled. I don't think so. Aizawa frowned, letting go of Bakugo's right wrist to better flip through the page. This was your English notebook. Does Yamada-sensei know this is what you think of his class? It was a graphic picture of Bakugo dying a terrible death. The teen was ready to get up and fight, but he was keenly aware of the soft padding between his legs. That and he was tired. He flopped back and turned onto his stomach. Aizawa slapped the boy's bottom through the blanket with the heavy notebook. Get changed. You're getting a spanking. You know the drill. Bakugo muttered from under his pillow and balled up his fists, which he pummeled a left hook into the soft cotton sack over his head. Get up or I'll bring the paddle here. A louder shout of distaste again, but yet again muffled. Finally, Shota had enough and ripped away the blanket and pillow. Hey, Bakugo shouted. Get up, came the teacher's order. I'm confiscating this book and you need breakfast. Get changed. Never in his years of teaching had Shota seen a student so embarrassed and incensed. Bakugo was shirtless, in only sweatpants and night briefs, the top of the diaper peering out. He was actually concerned if he should activate his erasure because Katsuki looked ready to kill. That was nonsense, however. There was no time for fighting a teen. There was a spanking to be had, breakfast to be eaten, and therapy to process. Aizawa explained that Bakugo had 30 seconds to change into clothes and then get ready for the day before he would be taken across the property to school. It was a Sunday and breakfast would be ready any minute, so it was time to get ready. From a semi-comfortable spot in All Might's unoccupied common room chair, brought in from the other floor, Eraserhead flipped through Bakugo's journal. There were names and phrases that didn't make sense and some pictures. It looked like these were things that Bakugo heard in his dream. Are we going or not? Bakugo asked, standing arms crossed cockily by the door as though he weren't absolutely shaking from nerves. Did you stay dry? Aizawa asked, standing up. The teen nodded and looked away as though he hadn't heard. Good, I'm proud. But I heard you tried to fight sleep for half of the night. You're not allowed to do that. After Katsuki brushed his teeth, the pair walked to the school, specifically to Aizawa's office, which was close to Nimiri's. Kayama-sensei was in my room this morning. Bakugo remembered aloud as he looked onto his homeroom teacher unlocking the door to his office. Yes, Aizawa said, opening the door. She came around 5 a.m. from doing rounds for the girls when your sitter called to say that you were forcing your eyes open. All Might feared you would not sleep. He watched as the student nervously entered and stood in front of a mirror propped atop a shelf. But by the time she arrived at 5:15, you were dead asleep. It stayed peaceful for an hour and then by 7. When it was time to wake up, you were a mess again. Frustrated and ashamed, Bakugo set the mirror face down. He didn't want to look himself in the face. I was fine. He lied. And I don't need Shoto's solution anymore. I've fixed myself. The drawer unlocked and Bakugo heard the paddle make gentle contact with the hardwood of the desktop. Shota set down the paddle and looked over at Bakugo. Get away from the exit, he demanded before continuing. One dry night is good but an outlier for certain. You can talk with Kayama-sensei. If she says you don't need a diaper, you can try without for a night. But, Bakugo began. Sit, Aizawa ordered. I'm not your counselor. I'm not here to hear out your grievances and why you decided to do things as you did, like run away. But, I will listen to you. You have the floor to talk things out before I explain why I am spanking you. Aizawa briefed. At Katsuki's silence, Shota decided to continue with the process and talk with the boy before going through the explanation of the process. Katsuki would have paid better attention, but he remembered enough from last time that when it was over, and he was told to stand from the couch and pull down his pants and underwear, he did. He stood there. He stood there like a little kid, covering his private area as best he could, but he wasn't standing for long. As soon as Aizawa returned with the paddle and sat down, he guided the boy across his lap and rolled up his sleeve. Each minute of Katsuki's age, he received a minute of spanking by hand and then would receive swats of the paddle, 1 per year, bent over the desk. And if there were any additions, Aizawa would name them before he began. So far, Bakugo was 2 minutes in and remaining stronger than he had before. He grit his teeth until his jaw ached. Soon he couldn't keep quiet. He shouted out occasionally and gripped onto the end of the sofa for any source of comfort. Katsuki, if you try to impede your bottom with your foot again, I'll swat the sole of your foot and you'll curse the day you began to walk. Aizawa once threatened. Yes, sensei, Bakugo said, immediately. He was mostly stunned that the great Eraserhead had just used his first name before the first loud O came into play. At 8 minutes, Bakugo started crying. 12 came and he finally couldn't take it anymore. He begged for Aizawa to stop. Do the rest another day. He would be the best student. He'd always do his homework. There would never be another lie from his mouth. Promises, promises, promises. It's okay to cry, you know, Aizawa said. 𝐒𝐵. Katsuki breathed in retribution. Everyone does, the instructor reminded. Not everyone. Bakugo wavered, on the verge of tears. Swat. Bakugo finally cried out again. It had been a while. At 14 minutes, he was fighting to get off of his teacher's lap, but Aizawa was a step ahead and straightened his left leg, slightly, to tilt the teen's bottom upwards and no longer allow Bakugo's feet to reach the floor. Finally, the clock ticked to the final second and Bakugo was allowed to get up and retrieve the paddle and bend over the desk. Bakugo wanted to rub out his bottom, but decided against it, as Aizawa rolled down his sleeve and grabbed the paddle. Katsuki got into position. He took the paddling better than the hand swats, but only marginally. After Aizawa cracked the last swat over the boy's rear, Bakugo was sent to the corner and handed his sweatpants and briefs. He waited, facing the corner, for 15 minutes and then was called to Aizawa and ordered to sit. Sitting seemed unfair, but Bakugo placed himself, gently, on the couch and listened to his teacher's calming voice as he explained that it was time for breakfast. "We will go to the cafeteria and you can ask to have yours in a bento and bring it to your room. I'll sign off with lunch rush. Therapy is at noon," Shota explained. He looked straight into Bakugo's eyes. "Katsuki Bakugo." He straightened up, standing. "If you ever run away again or do something reckless, I hope you understand that you will not be afforded the luxury of a spanking. You will be put into a hospitalization program for a month and then placed in general studies for a semester. I'm sorry, but I know that you are a smart boy and will choose well. Now get up and let's get you breakfast." And with that, they left for breakfast. Bakugo had breakfast away from everyone else, plain rice with nori flakes and a glass of tea. No one bothered him, which bothered him. Why is everyone being so distant? Where's Kirishima or Kaminari? He wanted to know, and as he was about to talk with them or interrupt their walk back to the dorms, he was pulled aside by Midnight Sensei. "You have an appointment, remember?" she said, voice low, as she nodded off towards the end of the hallway. Bakugo frowned. It was pointless to avoid counseling. Hell, if 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲𝗬𝗬𝐺 could do it, why couldn't he? He paused his thoughts for a second as he followed Kayama down the hallway. Shit, why couldn't he? By now she was a good couple of yards in front of him and he sidled up beside her, taking angry long steps to reach her first. "You're giving me my book back, right?" Katsuki asked. "Depends," Nimari said, trying to give an answer that wouldn't promise anything. They walked the rest of the way in silence and finally Bakugo stepped inside the office and took his regular seat. She pushed a large potted plant in front of the door this time. A challenge to slow down any escape attempts he might pull. Nightmares lay on the table in front of him with Midnight's hand clamping it flush against the table's surface. Bakugo's attention snapped away from the multitude of potted plants around the office. She really liked plants. "Are you giving it back to me?" Bakugo asked. Kayama slid it off the tabletop and took a seat, running her thumb pad over the spine of the book. "That probably won't happen," she said, honestly. "I first want to ask permission to look inside." Katsuki looked at his counselor, mistrust in his eyes. There were a few bad outcomes possible if she looked inside and didn't like what she saw. She might just toss it. Regardless, he allowed it and watched as she read the pages that fell into deeper and deeper disregard for margins and lines. The first line where she stopped her finger read something disturbing. "Kill your class." He didn't remember writing that. Was that something in his dissociations? He swallowed, facing it in reality he didn't know. She snapped the book closed and stood. Bakugo swallowed. He was afraid to speak but willed the words out. "Are you sending me to the hospital?" he asked, watching as she grabbed a pen and a tablet of lined yellow paper. She shook her head and held up a finger for silence before coming back to sit in front of him. "Katsuki, do you remember writing that?" "What you meant?" Midnight asked, concern written on her face. Bakugo looked at the floor in shame. No, he had no memory of it or even what it meant. When she handed over the pen and tapped on the paper, Katsuki began to understand. She was trying to get him to recreate it, the feeling, the nightmare. The pen felt heavy in his hand. He weighed it by bouncing it in his palm a few times before he spun it around his thumb and caught it in a writing position. He tapped the point against the first line and closed his eyes. He saw Shigaraki's moronic face, twisted in evil delight when the hood first came off Bakugo's head. He opened his eyes and looked down. "Nothing. Don't worry about the paper for a minute," Midnight assured. "Just answer my questions to the best of your ability and capacity." She paused. "What did you see?" "Tamura Shigaraki." Katsuki answered, voice low. "What did you feel?" "Feel? That was where things went wrong." Sure, he could see anything he damn wanted to, but it was when he started to feel things that he got scared. That's usually when he would urinate in fear at night. It was the parts of the dreams where he could almost touch a vision in a flashback that scared him. Because although he could almost many a time, he knew when he actually could. It was most likely real. But it wasn't. Nothing was real. Kayama-sensei reminded him many times, and so as she asked questions, he closed his eyes and let his pupils roll under the hood of his eyelids. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. His eyes were closed, but he knew that he was searching, and quickly. It became foggy, and then it became so realistic, he could almost feel it. There he went, down, 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 back and forth, looking. He found it. "So, you're back with us. Hope your lungs are okay," Tamura said, snidely. "Chloroform." It's a bitch. Bakugo refused to cough and so he gagged, bitter and acrid vomit in his mouth. He wanted to spit at Shigaraki, but he couldn't. He could only drool. The muscles in his face were mostly numb, still, and his throat lost cause trying to speak. It burned like he had swallowed a live wire that was barbed with razor-pointed edges. He threw up again in his mouth and swallowed it with painful force. "Where am I?" he squeaked out. Shigaraki laughed. "With friends, I assure you. And I hope you'll be good for us because we went through oh so much trouble trying to get you." Back in reality, Midnight was reading Bakugo's writing. "Where am I?" she called out to the teen. "Katsuki, you're at school." Bakugo heard it echo through his head and he looked for the sound. Tamura told him to ignore the voice. And afraid of the punishment, he did. He turned back to Shigaraki. "Okay, so if you're my friends, why am I all chained up?" Katsuki forcibly whispered, voice hoarse. "Because," came a voice from behind him, "we need to be able to trust you." It sounded like that guy he had heard in dreams before. "Shut it," twice. "I'm talking." Tamura whined like a kid. Bakugo wanted to laugh, though it sickened him. "Twice is 𝗳𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 decided to block her out. There was no hearing her now. Midnight looked at her clipboard. She had everyone's staff schedule. Someone had to wake the kid up. Damn it. She knew she needed Mike, but he was off today. He was probably with Aizawa. She grabbed her phone and called him. The racerhead and present Mike came, pushing the door in forcefully. She had not moved the plant, but nonetheless, they slipped in through the crack and shut the door, quietly. Yellow pages littered the desk. The pen's outer metal was red hot and the spot on the couch, where Bakugo was gripping, was burning away, slowly. The teen was sweaty and covered in vomit. Don't tell them that 𝐼𝐴 dead, the kids are the target. Mole and 𝐂𝐴𝑧𝐻𝑜OLTO frowned and clicked off his hearing aids. He walked up to Bakugo and frowned, looking upon the kid with pity and pointed. Aizawa nodded. Now, he overpronounced and signed. For his deaf husband? He didn't have his headphones on to assist him with his hearing. They had been romantically occupied, as lovers sometimes are, when they got the call, and now both had to get dressed and get to campus. 𝐒𝐴𝐢𝐽𝐻, Mike screamed before stepping back. Aizawa pulled his hair out of his bun and with dilated and red eyes, stopped the combusting boy's quirk. Bakugo came back and spat up the last of his drool before looking around and passing out. With hearing aids clicked back on, Hisashi Yamada tied his hair up into a bun and talked with Nimuri. What happened? What is this? He asked, looking over the papers with Midnight. His flashbacks, apparently, she said. No one realized just how bad these kids are. Aizawa arrived back into the room with a fresh shirt and a cool rag and prepared to wake the boy. He placed the rag on the teen's forehead. Get up, kid, you've puked on yourself. Bakugo opened his eyes and slowly blinked before changing. He stripped off his shirt and took the wet rag off of his forehead to wipe down his chest and abdomen. There was a lot of sweat behind his neck, too. Then he tried to stand. Not yet, Aizawa ordered, as Kayama-sensei helped him lay back down, lengthwise on the couch. They chucked the shirt and rag in a plastic bag and Mike left to go throw it in the staff laundry, back in the dormitories. Aizawa asked for a moment alone with his student. Sympathetically, Kayama left her own office for a moment to go and show the papers to Nezu. Why'd you send her away? Katsuki asked, sitting up. Katsuki, Aizawa said, understandingly. It's okay to cry. Now why the foo? Bakugo began to object, but it was too late. He was already crying. He curled himself into a ball and let the sobs shake him. Shoto placed a hand, awkwardly, on the boy's back and rubbed a small circle. It's okay to cry, problem student. It's okay. I'm going to make sure you know that it is perfectly fine. I can't promise you won't see them again, but I'll help take them down. Or I'll die trying. Bakugo lifted his head and shook it sadly, side to side. No more hurting the ones I love. If someone's going to be the hero, it's going to be me. Suddenly, Aizawa stiffened. Don't let me hear something like that out of you ever again. Just cry. Just be scared. Just be here, okay, problem student? A nod. Another sniffle. Kayama came back in and unzipped her sleeve. Aizawa held his breath. And just like that, Bakugo was asleep. TW mentions of suicidal ideation in teenagers' hours passed, and the other students had started to notice that Bakugo wasn't out in the common area, where he used to study all the time. Denki Kaminari and Eiichiro Kirishima were throwing pencils at a cup across the floor, sitting cross-legged, when Bakugo finally came out of his room. Well, he finally emerges the man of the hour, Denki said, getting up, off balance. Kirishima followed. You look like hell, my guy. The spiky red-haired student taunted. Bakugo shrugged. Just came out to study. You should too, he said, eyeing his friends. Nah, I'd rather throw pencils at a cup. If I get one in, that means that I should take a shower. Denki explained. Eiichiro laughed. Dude, you smell like garbage. That's the smell of your personality. Kaminari returned, sticking out his tongue. Kirishima punched him. Katsuki laughed. Finally, But then he cleared his throat and ordered silence. He sat, gingerly. The other boys exchanged looks. Ijiryu leaned over and whispered to Denki, "You owe me 500 yen. Bakugo totally got his ass whooped. Bakugo snapped his pen and crumpled his paper. He threw the pen across the room and with 2 satisfying clink sounds, it landed in the cup. "And you have to take a shower." Kirishima laughed. The boys dispersed but said their goodbyes to their hot-headed friend. At 10 in the evening, ectoplasm apparated one of his clones to the study room. He often appeared suddenly and out of nowhere, seemingly, when he was on dorm watching duty. "It is time for bed, Bakugo," ectoplasm announced. "Everyone else has left." Katsuki closed his notebook and pushed in his chair with the back of his foot. "Respectfully, sir, I'm not tired." Several clones converged into one in the echo lesson. He was talking to the actual body now. "Are you scared, young man?" "Why no," Bakugo sputtered, following his teacher to his room. "I'm not." Ectoplasm stopped outside of the student's door and lowered his voice. "Kayama-sensei has you down to being checked in only every 30 minutes. Another will be by to see you once more before you slumber. Please do try to rest." Ah, so that was why he had no shadow. Well, he liked it better that way. He nodded and punched in the code to his room before closing the door behind him. He had a text from Shoto. "Are you awake still, or have you already changed?" Katsuki ignored it, changed into his diaper, and scrolled on his phone. He wasn't feeling very well, but he decided that he was going to be fine. He just had to fall asleep. He put on headphones and blared music. At precisely 11, married teacher power couple, Shota Aizawa and Hisashi Yamada came in to check on the boy. Yamada-sensei handed over Bakugo's shirt that he recognized as that one shirt he threw up on earlier in the day. He cringed, remembering. "Are you okay?" Aizawa interrupted. "Yes," Katsuki responded, taking off his headphones. "Sensei, can I have my notebook back?" he asked. Shota shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we have decided that it isn't good for you." Bakugo was angry. He couldn't very well get on board with the whole everyone else knowing what was good for him train. He wanted to get mad, but Mike's cell went off and the pro hero's face went pale. He dashed out of the room. "1 minute," Aizawa said, following suit. There was shouting and someone slammed a door. Katsuki's fight or flight immediately set in. Someone had come for him. Someone was here. 𝐳𝐵𝐴RAKI, maybe? Panicked, he locked himself in the closet and hid behind the dresser. He felt blood drain from his face and his legs shook as he urinated in fear. "Damn it," Bakugo cried, covering his face and biting his hand, where his busted knuckle was still healing. He froze and stayed quiet as the door to his room was opened with a key. "Oh my god, he's in my room," Bakugo thought. He squeezed his eyes closed, but that made the images appear and suddenly he felt his eyes start to dart from the left to the right, reading some invisible ink on the back of his eyelids of a terrible story. A story he didn't want to remember. "Katsuki," came Aizawa's voice. "Where are you? Now is not the time for games. There is an emergency and I need to account for you." Finally, after Aizawa searched the room, Mike came in and traded places. He looked in the closet after asking, "Babe, did you check the closet?" and got the response, "Zashi, why would he be in the closet?" But there he was, frozen in fear, eyes squeezed closed, behind the dresser. Present Mike lightly touched the boy's shoulder and towed him out and put him on the bed. "Infirmary I think should do well for both of them," came a distinct voice. Midnight. She was called in yet again for another crisis. "Good night, Bakugo," she said, ripping her sleeve. Bakugo held his breath, but she planned for that and chopped the back of his neck, leaving him gasping for air and falling asleep. He never opened his eyes. When sun came through the blinds, Katsuki looked over to Todoroki, who was changing into a fresh t-shirt. He was more quiet than usual, and his diaper had been rolled up and bagged and thrown away in the bin. "Shoto," Bakugo asked. "Where?" "Infirmary," Shoto answered. "Why?" came another question from Katsuki. But he never got to ask, because All Might came past the curtain after asking for permission and looked, sadly, at the two boys. "Good morning, young gentlemen. Are you ready?" Now Bakugo was thoroughly confused. Ready for what? What's going on? Arg. It's like I have no clue what is even happening anymore. Shoto was putting his boots on. He wasn't in his uniform. Finally, he looked at Katsuki. "Last night, Io was upset. I thought about jumping out of the window. I'm going to the hospital for a psych evaluation." Bakugo thought back to the text message. Shit, that was how Todoroki was asking for help. Calmly, All Might nodded. "Pack your things for a few days. I'm taking you back to the dorms." He looked at Bakugo. "And you, young man, you have school in an hour. Snipe-sensei is coming by to bring you to breakfast." Okay, so that answered whether Bakugo was going. For now he was in the clear. For once, however, he didn't want to go to school. He cleared his throat. "I'm not feeling very well. May I stay in the infirmary?" All Might looked perplexed. "Stay? Well, I guess you can. I'll call recovery girl." He turned back to Shoto. "The cab driver just texted. We have a few minutes. Let's get your stuff. Katsuki stood, sweating in place, but realizing that Todoroki may really be put in a psychiatric ward made his heart drop. He called to Shoto, making the other teen turn around. Deeply, Bakugo bowed and returned upright. He scowled. Get better, you pussy. There wasn't much to do in the clinic. After all, it was just supposed to be where you were tended to and rested up. Not much excitement there. Katsuki didn't even have his phone. Damn, he took a nap and then waited in silence for a few minutes before Snipe came by. He rested his hands on the holsters of his guns. Ready, kid? He asked. Bakugo shook his head. He wasn't hungry. Truly, he wasn't. But it did seem odd since he didn't eat anything last night that he could remember. Kid, Snipe snapped in front of his face. I'm not hungry, Katsuki responded. Snipe sighed. You need to make some improvements. Get ready and wash up. I'll be waiting in the hallway. You've got 10 minutes. Breakfast was an hour ago, but there's some food set aside for you in the break room. Bakugo realized that he was still wearing his night attire, but was strangely without underwear. Recovery Girl must have changed him when he was knocked out with Midnight Sensei's sleep spell. His face burned bright red and he grabbed his uniform from the end of his bed, ignoring the sticky note on it. He washed his hair and rubbed a bar of hospital soap over his shoulders and abdomen before rinsing off and getting changed. Aggressively, he told off his hair and picked up the sticky note. It was from Aizawa, excusing him from class. Tentatively, Bakugo followed Snipe and listened to him talk, but wasn't necessarily listening. He was anxious and waited patiently as the door was unlocked to the staff room. When he walked in, a handful of teachers were working. Many had their own offices, but it was here that the printer and copier were and it was here that they got to relax. A few looked at Bakugo and said nothing. Snipe handed him his breakfast. He was offered a chance to go to the gym with All Might that afternoon at 1 o'clock. Why now? Katsuki asked. All Might sat down with a cup of tea. You've been changing yourself into your diapers at night without fighting the staff, and we think that getting to get some energy out safely would be a good reward. Pat and I know you were unprepared for Todoroki's psych evaluation. I'm sorry no one told you earlier. All Might confessed. We knew that you would have to deal with it and I wanted to personally apologize that you have to keep another secret, this time for young Shoto. We are telling the students nothing at the current time. If he is admitted, we will say he is on a work study. A work study? Bakugo asked. All Might nodded. They talked for an hour before Katsuki asked for permission to use a treadmill and lift for a bit. He had gotten into deadlifting and wanted to try to move up in weights. All Might warned against it, as he hadn't been in the gym for 2 weeks, and when Bakugo torqued his back, he received a heavy sigh and swat on the bottom with a clipboard before being brought to Recovery Girl, whom was not thrilled to see the boy again, but had more mercy this time. Lunch was served and Bakugo joined Kirishima and Kaminari in the cafeteria. Dude, where were you? Ijirio asked. We were all worried that something happened. Denki added. Bakugo swallowed and took a sip of water as he shrugged. Torqued my back, deadlifting. I'm on bed rest, but I gotta eat, so here I am. Suddenly, Katsuki felt himself getting nervous. He hadn't explained why he was out of the gym for so long, either. It's not like he could explain that he wore diapers and was punished for a rash he gave himself. Brought to his attention, too, was the loud sounds of the cafeteria and quickly onset anxiety seeping into his bones. He made an excuse, got up, and dashed out. Present Mike was waiting outside the cafeteria for him, early, for a 15-minute check, when Bakugo ran out. Quickly, Mike caught him by the back of his shirt. Bakugo, what's wrong? Like-sensei asked, kindly. I gotta go, Katsuki said, feeling his knees get weaker by the heartbeat. Aizawa-sensei came stalking up to the pair. He had previously been monitoring the cafeteria. What's wrong? Hisashi Yamada was lost. Katsuki seemed fine 5 minutes ago. Together, Aizawa and Yamada-senseis walked Bakugo to the infirmary. Recovery Girl took one look at the pale teen and said, the poor boy is having a panic attack. I'll give him a sedative, she decreed, before leaving to fix an intramuscular shot. While she was gone, however, Hisashi had to leave to meet with 𝐒𝐴𝐺, whom had picked somebody up from a cab service and was bringing out patient charts. Todoroki. Shoto appeared calm but exhausted and was returned to the same bed in the room that Bakugo had been in repeatedly since last night. He took a seat and unzipped his backpack. Here, they gave me this, he said, showing an orange prescription bottle to Aizawa. It's only as needed. I won't need it. Katsuki was still trying to calm down. When did you last take one? Aizawa asked, turning around the bottle in his hand. These are sedatives. That means you're going to sleep. Shoto stifled a yawn. He shook his head and looked up. Over an hour ago. I told you I don't want to go to the hospital and I'm pledged for safety. I'll tell you if I feel badly. You need to change then if you're taking a nap, young man. Recovery Girl warned. She turned back to Bakugo, needle in hand, and asked for him to roll to his side. She heeded access to the biggest muscle, which happens to be his glute. Aizawa kept watch of Shoto, while Yamada closed the curtain between the two boys. Give yourself a hug. Present, Mike told Bakugo. And just relax. I need to access below your back for the shot. As Ashi lightly pulled down the waistband of Katsuki's shorts, and then the needle was injected for 3 seconds before being removed and the boy was covered with a sheet. Aizawa popped his head over. You need to change too, you're taking a nap. Both Bakugo and Todoroki objected to wearing a diaper. It was at the threat of a spanking that they both changed behind their curtains and fell asleep. Tomorrow was another school day. They could try again tomorrow. Until then, Momoyaoyuruzu was taking notes for any absent students. Aizawa sighed as he walked out of the clinic with Yamada-sensei. Mike, promise me that we are never having children, he said, seriously. Ashi laughed. Only 5. Great, Shota said. New promise, we are never having stubborn children. Yeah, I already have your stubbornness in my life. Mike smiled. May I hold your hand? He asked. I don't know that we're there yet, Eraserhead admitted. We've done more than hold hands, and you know what I mean. Ashi laughed. That's kinda gay. Aizawa smirked. That's why I married you, Ashi stated. He ended up putting his hands in his pockets. You're right. No adopting stubborn children. You're one. Aizawa looked over. Love you. Ashi blushed. Love you, too. The Bakugo parents had been keeping a close eye on Katsuki, as well as working with the school. Principal Nezu finally got an answer he'd been expecting. A yes to sending Katsuki for a psychiatric evaluation. While the school could not disclose any information on the Todoroki boy's experience, they did confirm that a student had gone in and was doing better on medication. Keeping him safe at night was the main hope of the Bakugo parents and staff, especially because the staff was splitting off to watch both Shoto and Bakugo on nights. The 2 teen boys were on 15-minute checks, and when there were not enough eyes to go around, the boys had to share a room in the infirmary. They also fought a lot. After finding blood on Todoroki's pillow and a burn on Bakugo's neck, it had become obvious that the 2 boys were fighting and hiding it. Now it was 1 in the morning and Aizawa was grilling them for answers. Afraid of a spanking, neither boy would admit it. Why are you fighting? Aizawa asked, confused. It's 1 a.m. You should be asleep. We all should, he said, adding the latter part with a dose of bitterness. But Shoto nor Katsuki felt bad. They were used to their teacher being tired. We got into a disagreement, sure, but we're used to fighting with each other, Todoroki said, calmly. He was tired and had actually already gotten to sleep. He was also sitting in a partially soaked diaper because he went to sleep and it was getting itchy. Bakugo agreed. Yeah, Aizawa was not amused. Are you boys keeping your fights verbal, or do we need to talk about keeping our hands to ourselves? That got Bakugo angry. He hated being talked to like a kid. It's a sad early morning. We got into a disagreement. End of story, sensei. With a heavy sigh, Aizawa nodded to Todoroki's pillow and to the pillowcase hidden under the mattress. A corner stuck out. He was also hiding at least 1 sheet of paper. He would have to ask what that was about later. The instructor then made eye contact with Katsuki and then to the burn mark on the neck. Looks like Todoroki's handprint. Hurts, doesn't it? Shota said. Both boys looked away. He continued. We are installing a monitor. End of story. Todoroki, I'm pulling the curtain closed. See that you change your overnight briefs. Bakugo, you're squirming. Do you have a rash? The instructor asked, pulling the curtain closed. He added one more thing, speaking through the curtain. And Todoroki, if I think you're doing something stupid, I will come over there. Shoto sighed. Yes, sensei. He turned to Katsuki and crouched down, voice low. I want you to go take a shower and apply an antibiotic cream to your rash and take better care. I am bringing you to the hospital for an evaluation at your parents' request. Katsuki's eyes widened and he looked genuinely scared for a second before masking it with anger. He took a deep breath to start an argument, but Aizawa cut him off. And if you cause a scene about this and act like a little kid, I have permission to discipline you. I believe your mother when she says that you are combative with authority. I will not tolerate it, so get a shower and address the downstairs situation and be ready to go to the hospital at 7. The pro hero stood. Todoroki, are you changed? The curtain opened. Shoto was in his workout civilian clothes and his bottom was not padded. Under his shorts, his knee had an awful bruise that looked as if it was swelling rapidly. I'm not sleeping anymore. I'm going to the gym. Aizawa caught sight of the bruise. No, you're not. Go put an ice pack on that right now. He got up from his crouch by Katsuki's bed. It was nearing 2. The gym was open always, sure, but the kids needed to swipe their ID cards and that was back at the dorm. And you, he said, turning back to Bakugo. Shower. Now, Todoroki and Bakugo got up and were sent in separate directions. Katsuki to the bathroom that they shared, and Shoto to the small fridge out of the room in the office next door. Shota Aizawa sighed. He was getting a headache. Neither the shower turned on, nor did Todoroki come back within 5 minutes. Oh, fuck. Now whom did he go to check on first? The silence in the bathroom was concerning. Bakugo seemed to only go quiet when flashbacks started, but Shoto was already being stubborn. As Aizawa made his way to the bathroom, the water turned on and Katsuki walked out in a towel. "I forgot soap," he said, fetching the bar out of a plastic medical bin that also had his changing supplies. "So that's where Bakugo was. Good. Now Shoto." The door chimed and then chimed a second time. Shota took off into a sprint and ran out of the room and looked down the hallway to find his husband, Hisashi Yamada, holding Todoroki by the back of his shirt. "Lost one," Yamada said, marching Todoroki back to the room. While Shota checked his watch, Hisashi sat Shoto on his bed and lectured him on how he didn't get to pull a whatever man attitude and leave for the gym and that there would be discipline. Todoroki didn't seem to care. Finally Aizawa interrupted. "What's going on?" he finally asked, pulling up a plastic chair that the overnight sitters typically used as of a few nights ago. Shoto looked away. "Eyes, here," Shota ordered. "I just want to forget about it, okay? Can we not talk about this?" Todoroki pled. Yamada narrowed his eyes. Shoto was gently touching his scarred eye. A light bulb went off. "What's with the contraband under your mattress?" "Right." Aizawa meant to check that. He tapped on Shoto's shoulder to scoot off the bed for a second and lifted the hospital mattress. It crinkled with the bedwetting sheet on and he found a lot of torn paper and the nosebleed-streaked pillowcase. He took the articles out and placed it on the bedside table that held a plastic bin with Shoto's changing supplies. It had letters addressed to his mother and there were deep tears through them. "Is it a trauma anniversary?" Hisashi gently asked. "My eye." Todoroki nodded. He flopped back and rolled over. "And I keep dreaming about it. It's more of a nightmare than a dream." Yamada was studying the drawings and reading the letters to ensure they were no goodbye forever notes. They were not, but there was a lot of anger and regret. He stacked them as best he could and placed them under the supplies bin. Hisashi spoke. "Shoto, thank you for telling us so that we can understand. I will take you to the gym in the morning. We will go at 7, but you need to go back to sleep now. Do you want an Ativan?" Todoroki shook his head. Aizawa opened a drawer and pulled out a diaper. "You need to change. Do it now before Katsuki gets out." Todoroki muttered his grievances on having to change into a fresh one into his pillow. Suddenly Shota checked his watch again, realizing that Katsuki should be out of the shower. It was 2:30 in the morning. It had been about a half hour since he returned with soap. There was no way that water was still hot. Hisashi seemed to pick up on the anxiety his husband was feeling because it occurred to him, too, that Bakugo had been MIA for some time now. Aizawa set down the diaper and picked up his husband's clipboard. He swatted Shoto's bottom hard, making the boy object loudly and pick his head up out of the uncovered pillow. "Next one is on your boxers or a diaper. Choose." Shota threatened the double-quirked boy. The instructor realized the extent of how much this kid was never raised. Shoto was usually polite and kind, but as with teenaged boys, when they didn't want to do something because of their pride, they put up quite a fight. He had a feeling that Endeavor didn't do much to help his son. Realizing that if he didn't put on his tabbed briefs, he was in for a spanking, Todoroki sat up and took the diaper. Aizawa thanked him and moved to the other side of the curtain, after closing the door to the room. Bakugo was now on his bed, hair spiky from being towel dried and combed out. "You, too. I will wake you up at 6. Change into a diaper or your bottom faces a wooden clipboard on the bear," Aizawa said. Bakugo nodded. It was odd seeing the boy openly nervous, but he took the clean diaper. Mike decided that he would stay with the boys, as Aizawa was now without an extra 2 hours of sleep. They moved to the hallway. "I'll sit and watch until we can have a monitor put it. Bakugo has a burn on his back, too. They fought for sure," Yamada explained. "Go now. Our bed should still be warm." Aizawa thanked him and kissed his cheek. "See you at 6. See you at 6. 6:30 arrived and Shoto had already gotten up and showered and headed to the gym with Mike Sensei. Meanwhile, Katsuki was getting dressed. Jeans and a t-shirt. Shota Aizawa arrived to the infirmary and found the teen putting on his shoes. "How did you sleep?" Aizawa asked the student, now lacing up. "Didn't." Bakugo frowned. "And with that, I am ready to go," he said, setting down his foot. "Did you brush your teeth?" Shota questioned. "Yes," Katsuki said, exasperated. "Did you take care of your rash?" Aizawa asked. At another exasperated answer, Shota deemed the teen ready to go and they took a cab to the hospital. Shota looked at the boy, who was watching other cars pass, yet overall dissociating. The ride was about 26 minutes long, enough for Aizawa to fill out some preliminary paperwork and read through Bakugo's parental notes. Main concern: screening for PTSD and mood management. The instructor read up on some past history and was surprised that Izuku Midoriya was listed under close friends and no others from childhood. The seat moved and Shota turned to see the teen peering over at the file. "Is that about me?" Katsuki asked. In return, Aizawa nodded, but did not offer the folder, as the boy was prone to act up sometimes and he feared might act unpredictably, throwing it off the bridge. Aizawa couldn't help but ask, "Do you consider Midoriya a close friend?" he asked. Bakugo propped his knees up on the back of the passenger's seat. "Deku, no, I've just known him forever. Can't seem to get rid of him, either." He thought for a second. Why is that scrub in my paperwork under pain in the ass? The instructor said nothing, allowing the boy to choose to elaborate. He did. I guess he's the only one from my middle school, and my parents always liked him. They said that I should play nicely with him, but I didn't want to play with him at all, really. He was quirkless and I had no pity. Bakugo laughed, told him to even take a swan dive off of our old middle school and see if he got a quirk in the next life. He turned his head to see his teacher, expressionless, leaning towards Matt. His smile went away. I guess I was insecure when he first got. He looked at the cab driver, whom was paying no attention. He didn't risk to say how Deku got his quirk. Instead, he looked back at Aizawa. I said that before any chance he had at making UA. I'm a horrible person, and yet I want to be a hero so badly. I want to be nice, I just don't know how to be. Maybe that's what made me look like a potential villain, my lack of empathy. Is there something wrong with me? He blinked. The car slowed. We're here, was all Shota said, as the car pulled to a stop. There was no real answer to Katsuki's question. Questioning your sanity, your goodness, badness, your appearance, your anything, made you human. Katsuki Bakugo was definitely that, human. They walked inside and Shota gave the name at triage. They waited outside of a doorway to be taken in for vitals. Bakugo Katsuki, a nurse read. There was silence. The teen had frozen up. Aizawa nudged him and he stood up on his feet and raised his hand, weakly, before taking a step behind the curtain. He popped back out. Are you coming? Aizawa had not intended on coming, but the obvious anxiety and darting eyes typically meant that the boy was about to run, and if Shota wanted this boy to have a chance, he had to get him to the doctor. He stalked across the hallway, grabbed the boy's sleeve and yanked him down into a chair 5 paces from the curtain. 𝗵𝗲, I'll be helping take your vitals today, okay? She asked. Good bedside manner, Aizawa noted. He observed the way that she talked with Katsuki, and noted the teen's hesitation to say anything back. She asked him to take a deep breath and then turn his head to cough. Bakugo's eyes started darting the moment she announced for him to follow to where the doctor would meet them for a consultation. The student was fast, but his teacher was faster. Shota grabbed the boy's arm and whispered as they walked down the hall. Try anything, and I will tan you out, publicly. Shota wasn't sure if the boy heard, as he yanked his arm back. But his eyes were wide open with alarm, and he rubbed his arm, back slouched, muttering about how he'd never try something in public. Aizawa was satisfied that the boy would behave. They met Dr. Tsukino and she asked him about any medication he'd tried. When he couldn't come up with anything, she turned to Aizawa. And I take it you're his legal guardian. I have his insurance and personal background paperwork faxed over from his parents. They've been working with the school. Shota answered. She read over the files again, having just seen the same ones uploaded a while before. After a while of zoning out and allowing Katsuki to speak, there was silence. He tuned back in. What do you qualify as a psychosomatic reaction? Bakugo asked. Dr. Tsukino answered. Well, that means, like, if you fell off your bike and scraped your knee and everyone laughed at you, you may have a ghost pain in your knee when you're embarrassed. Victims of trauma may feel that something is reenacted in their body. Bakugo looked at Aizawa, who nodded. Katsuki, however, shared some things that Shota was unaware of. Well, my shoulders randomly get sore because the League of Villains henchmen twice chained up my arms too tight so that I couldn't fight. Now it hurts to lift heavy things. Sometimes I feel like I cannot breathe, no matter how much I inhale or exhale because of the gag, and sometimes at night. The teen looked away. I have nightmares, and now he looked at Aizawa, pleading to not have to say it. Young Bakugo experiences enuresis when nightmares occur. Aizawa mercifully answered. I what? Katsuki asked. Wet the bed. Shota explained to the boy. You urinate from fear. Bakugo puffed up his chest. Yeah, but I didn't last night. You didn't sleep, Shota quipped. He looked at the nurse, and his sleep quality is not helped by the rash. Yeah, thanks, Bakugo said, monotonously. You're welcome, Shota replied. The doctor talked some more to Katsuki and Shota listened when appropriate and watched the clock the other time. After an hour, she stood and took out a prescription pad. Prazosin, Ativan, and Lamictal, she said, signing and tearing it off. I'll call it in for you, Katsuki. They are for nightmares, anxiety as needed, and mood stabilization. Dr. Tsukino looked at Shota. Do you mind getting these filled? Aizawa accepted the paper and bowed his head. Of course not, thank you. Bakugo was shaking his hands. So do I have to stay here? The doctor looked surprised, like impatient. She shook her head. As long as you can track to safety, I feel okay with letting you go. Katsuki looked at Aizawa, whom gave a thumbs up. The boy bowed. Thank you, doctor. And with that they called for a cab and waited outside the hospital. So can I go back to my room at night? Bakugo asked. Shota responded. You're on new meds, so no. Please, Katsuki begged. No, Aizawa shut down. But Bakugo was not done. What if no? The pair got back into the cab and sat in traffic, making what was 26 minutes, 36 minutes. Katsuki leaned over. Maybe if. No, Aizawa gave, finally. When the teen arrived to the infirmary, he could hear the shower on. Shoto must have returned from the gym, Katsuki thought. He kicked off his shoes and opened his notebook. Being Saturday, there was no school. Bakugo was prepared for Monday's exam on hero legality regulations, which was so incredibly boring and easy. He decided to look elsewhere for entertainment. The gym sounded like a good plan. Having been kept away for the most part sucked. Katsuki kept his muscle tone by working out in private. When he couldn't sleep at night, he would often do sets of 100 push-ups or sit-ups. Shoto didn't seem to care too much. As long as his infirmary roommate didn't keep grunting and playing his music in his headphones so loudly that Todoroki, himself, 10 feet away, could hear it, he didn't care. And yes, Shoto eventually got out of the shower. After about a half hour, Toshinori-sensei came in. All Might, Bakugo asked, surprised. What are you doing here? Lunchtime, young gentleman, the former pro announced. Katsuki hopped off his bed. I'm not hungry. Can I go to the gym? All Might shook his head. According to today's vitals, you've lost about 2% of your body weight. Sorry, but you have to eat. This was annoying to young Bakugo. Of course he'd lost weight. It just had to be muscle loss. That's why he needed the gym. Todoroki was waiting in the hallway and was reminded that he had to stay with staff since he didn't have a glowing psychiatric consultation either. Finally, Katsuki was corralled to the lunch line, and he talked with his roommate. How was the gym? Icy hot, Bakugo asked, with a side of snark. Went better for me than it did for you. Shoto shrugged. That shut Katsuki up for a minute. Once he finished his lunch, he returned to the infirmary. Present Mike had just finished installing a camera and stepped off the step stool. Was that necessary? Todoroki asked. Mike-sensei quirked an eyebrow. It was rare to get any kind of pushback from Shoto. We were just debating. Bakugo groaned. And isn't it weird that you're going to watch us get changed? To that, Hizashi slapped a sticky note under the camera. Monitoring unit off 6 a.m. 6:15 a.m. 3 p.m. 3:15 p.m. 8 p.m. 8:15 p.m. all other times. Unit remains on. The boys listened to their teacher explain the note. They had 45 minutes per day that the camera was off to get changed. That included briefs morning and night and school uniforms in the afternoon. The curtain could be closed up to the line of painter's tape on the floor. And what if we closed the curtain all the way? Katsuki dared. You don't want to know, was all the voice hero said before taking the step stool and leaving. Todoroki lined up his shoes at the end of his bed and placed 2 thick textbooks on his bed before he started reading. Bakugo followed suit, laying on his bed and searching on his phone. He plugged in his headphones and played his favorite music. Full volume. Shoto was highlighting the notes he needed. He capped the marker and looked at Katsuki with a piercing glare. Can you turn it down? He asked politely. He asked again, then louder, before throwing a metal mechanical pencil like a dart into the wall. Bakugo's head whipped around to look at Todoroki with fuming anger. He ripped off his headphones, music still playing. You wanna go, Ice Princess? Katsuki screamed over his music. No, I want you to turn it down, Shoto requested. It's in my damn headphones, Bakugo shouted, thrusting them in his hand. Todoroki developed an edge to his voice. Yeah, well, it's not staying in them and I'm trying to study. Logic was not on Lord Explosion Murder's side, however, as he, himself, could hear the music from about a meter away. It's not that loud. Well, it bothers me, Shoto replied, getting up to get his pencil. He reached for it, but his rival snatched it faster and snapped it in two. That was enough. Now the typically level-headed teen was ready to fight. He pulled his fist back by his ear when they were interrupted. Congratulations. You are both rewarded with a nap, Aizawa stated. Todoroki, get to your bed. Their teacher pulled the curtain to the line on the floor so neither was looking at each other. Shoto left the room for a single minute and returned with a paper cup and a bottle of water. He handed the wash cup with a capsule pill to Bakugo and then the water. Drink and take that, he ordered, before crossing back to the other side of the curtain and checking in on Shoto. Annoyed, Bakugo slipped the pill into his sock and drank half of the water from the bottle before capping it and putting it on his bedside table. Satisfied that the boys were going to lay down for at least an hour, Aizawa tried to leave, but was met by his husband, Hizashi Yamada, at the door of the infirmary. He knew that look. Hizashi was not impressed. Following suit, Shoto turned on his heel and filed behind. Yamada took Bakugo's phone and met the boy's annoyance with a question. What's in your sock? The pro asked young Katsuki. Todoroki had been laying on his side, but perked up. Aizawa pulled the curtain closed all the way so that it blocked the camera. Bakugo's head whipped over to check it. He decided to feign ignorance. What the hell are you talking about? The student asked, shifting his legs to sit up off the side of the bed. Aizawa removed Todoroki from the infirmary to take a walk before his forced nap. Bakugo, upon hearing the door close, took the capsule out of his sock and handed it over. Mike was annoyed. It was a single pill. 𝐬𝐸𝐽 already took extra hours out of his off day to bring the boy to the hospital and get the prescription, and Katsuki wouldn't even take it. You should be changed if you're going to take a nap. You can change into your briefs after your spanking. Mike did not allow the boy to speak at this point. Because you take it or you go to the hospital, little listener. A minute later, Bakugo, with his arms crossed, had his pants and briefs pulled down and was led over the lap of present Mike. Aizawa was right, he was a total lecturer. Katsuki Bakugo, you are rewarded with consequences for your utter defiance to take your prescribed medication like a responsible adolescent and are therefore met with 15 minutes of discipline. Expect what you would get from Eraserhead Sensei but harder. Katsuki gulped in nerves. With that, Mike Sensei started the rain of hellfire on the boy's bottom. There were differences, for sure, but the worst part was Mike's constant questioning that disallowed the teen to dissociate and think about other things. By 11 minutes, Bakugo had tears dropping onto the tiled infirmary floor and he had to wipe his nose with the hand he was propping himself up on. When present Mike was done with a "Do you understand me, little listener?" and a hard swat, he was allowed to stand and face the corner. Yamada opened the drawer that contained Katsuki's changing supplies. He grabbed a tabbed night brief and the prescription ointment. At his order, Katsuki was given 2 minutes to change while Hisashi turned around. When he was changed, Yamada-sensei had grabbed a tongue depressor from the clinic's main room. Bakugo lay on his stomach, listening to music, but smartly turned it off when approached by his English teacher and given the pill. Todoroki had returned with Aizawa, and it appeared that whatever his classmate had talked about, it wasn't pleasant, as Shoto had puffy eyes and sniffled, once giving his location away. He took the pill this time with the water, had his mouth and cheeks checked before he lifted his tongue. Yamada snapped the stick and threw it in the wastebasket. That is what they do in the hospital, was the final thing the instructor said, before ordering the boy to sleep and pulling back the curtain so that it could view both boys. Dinner is at 6 o'clock, Aizawa informed the boys. See you then. With that announcement, the instructors left. It was a boring week at school and both Shoto and Katsuki were able to fly under the radar and keep their behaviors in line well enough to be moved back into the dorms. Mr. Aizawa stacked the quizzes in his hands. We have a training camp coming up next week. If memory serves me correctly, not much has been done to help your quirks, physically, but techniques and mastery remain to be improving. The students buzzed with excitement and nerves. Todoroki looked at Bakugo and received a glare back. That being said, it will be hard and you will have to use teamwork as a class to be able to obtain anything significant from this training camp. Please use this weekend to rest and pack for 5 days. If you have questions, please keep them to yourselves or ask Mike, who seems to be just as excited. And fret not. We will have full security and will not be detailing to anyone other than upper management the exact location of this camp. That is all. You are dismissed, he said, in finality with the bell. The students shuffled out and Aizawa headed to the staff lounge. He sat down with a cup of tea and the dorm instructors, Midnight, Present Mike, and All Might. He looked up from his phone to see that he was the first one there. He set down his bag and took a seat on the couch. He closed his eyes and leaned on his propped-up fist. "Guess who?" came a voice, and a pair of light-skinned hands covering his eyes. A whisper came to Shota's ear. "I'll give you a hint, you've been his bottom for 10 years. Mike Aizawa choked on his own oxygen. "Correct," Mike sang. "Sorry I'm late," Midnight said, taking a seat. "I am here," All Might boomed, with a grin. He took a seat across from Present Mike and Eraserhead. "And I brought biscuits, so I'm not that sorry that I am 2 minutes late," he admitted. They got down to logistics. Aizawa cleared his throat. "You know what I am going to raise with the trouble kids?" He trailed off. The group nodded and he continued. "Well, I don't think we need it being obvious that Todoroki and Bakugo have accommodations, and I don't think having the two of them constantly isolated is healthy. I have another student for you, Eraserhead." Toshinori raised. He waited for a second before sighing. "Izuku Midoriya is having nighttime wedding, too. It's been a few days, evidently. He disclosed it to me just now and is worried about sharing a cabin with the boys." Kaoma frowned. "That makes 3 boys showing signs of trauma. And we have girls that are uncomfortable with this, too." Gyro and Uraraka look beaten down. "They go to bed on time, but as far as I know, they are unwilling to sleep in the dorms without a nightlight. How are we supposed to accommodate the hard stuff if we don't even know what to do for a simple nightlight?" Yamada spoke. "Nightlights are easy show, and I stayed at this camp our senior year, and even though that was 6 years ago, every cabin had a lantern out front, and I think they have power outlets inside. We'll just make it mandatory that every cabin has a lantern inside, too. Let's just lie to the students and say it so we can do head counts. Should we let them have their cell phones?" All Might asked. "No," all of the others chorused. "We'll keep them safe. Snipe and Hound Dog are coming, too, don't forget," Midnight said. They all nodded and left for their dorms while the students excitedly packed and relaxed on a Friday evening. Hisashi walked with Shota and spoke. "Being a teacher is hard, especially when your kids are under attack, constantly." He sighed. We have to make cabin arrangements. Let's go to the infirmary and count meds, I suppose, 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 said. And what was up with your comment in the staff room? Mike blushed. I wanted to get your blood pumping. You look tired. Thug, 𝐻𝐸𝐽 responded. They found recovery girl. Hello, 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲. They greeted recovery girl. We need a week of meds and diapers for 3 students. She left and came back with a whole box. Wow, there's more, recovery girl assured. You'll need to store emergency 𝐒𝐴DVAN in a vial in the fridge or a cooler for Bakugo. Mike, you've been giving the intramuscular shots, right? Yes, ma'am, Mike assured. I'll need a sharps container in Mr. 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲. Mr. 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲. It was 𝗂𝐭𝐚𝐲 Midoriya's voice. He was running, full speed. Kaken needs his meds. The student was leaning on the door handle and panting. What's going on, Midoriya? 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 asked. Back turned to Mike and recovery girl, already leaving. Where is he? He's in his room, but he locked the door and I don't know the code or have an auxiliary key, but he was breathing really hard and then it just stopped and he won't respond. We were the only ones on the floor. I don't think anyone else knows and Kaken would be so pissed if anyone found out. But I think the most important thing, Deku continued to mutter. They arrived on the dorm's property and entered before running up the stairs. Shoto was talking to Katsuki through the door, trying to look and see anything he could under the door. Thank you, gentlemen, you are dismissed, Shoto said, shooing away Midoriya and Todoroki. They left for the elevator and 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 was already in the room, where Bakugo was aspirating vomit and covered in urine on the floor in his boxers and an undershirt. He was having a traumatic flashback. 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 did what he did best and lectured the boy. Young Bakugo, if you are going to make such a scene, at least be dressed. It caught Katsuki's attention and his eyes began shifting in his head, looking for reality. Eraser, yeah, kiddo, Shoto said calmly. Just come on back. Wake up and for the love of God spit. You've inhaled your lunch. Again. There you go. It's just fine. Spit out and give one good cough to clear your airway. Gently, 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 toweled off the boy's face and gave a few blows to the middle of his shoulder blades to clear the aspiration as you would a small child, and Katsuki drooled. 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 wiped it up. He knew what he believed. If this scared boy were his kid, he'd be out of UA and in a residential trauma program far away and protected. But given that it was a systematic failure by himself as a teacher in the school, they must accommodate the boy. Bakugo sat up and for once in a long time, cried. 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 knelt down again and stripped the boy's shirt over his head and grabbed a fresh pair of boxers for the young hero in training to change into and turned around. When he looked back at the mess of a teen on the floor, he was still in just his soiled boxers. Mike entered and through the door a few minutes later with bleach wipes and a bag to clean up the mess, while 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 sat the shell-shocked boy on the bed, with his hips wrapped in a clean towel. Young Bakugo, 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 asked. Yeah, I'm fine, okay. Look, just don't get all bitchy about it. I just had a little freak-out moment. No, you had a full flashback that scared you so badly. You ejected everything in your body, 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 said. And you are not going to the training camp. I've decided. A knock sounded on the door, and recovery girl was there with a needle. 𝐴DVAN, 1 dose. Recovery girl is here. Yamada changed topics, closing the door behind 𝐒𝐽𝐴𝐽 and returning to clean the floor. Everyone stop, Bakugo said. I want to go to the training camp. I need to just. 𝐒𝐽𝐴𝐽𝐻. 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 sat next to Katsuki and pulled him over his lap. You can't spank me for trying to hey. Bakugo fought. He didn't receive a spanking, but rather an injection to the left butt cheek. That will calm you down a little, 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 said. And you need to calm down. I will let you go on this training camp, but you have to take your pills and you have to wear your briefs at night. I've already segregated you into a cabin with 2 others, okay. Bakugo was sat back up and handed the boxers. It was now just Mike and 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 left with Katsuki. Put some underpants on, please, Mike said. You have 2 days to prove you can go. Behave. The teachers left. Bakugo slept. And in 48 hours they made the decision that for reasons better or worse, King Explosion Murder God Dynamite was coming with. The 2 days flew by. Soon enough, everyone was packing their things up onto the bottom of the bus, just like before. There were, of course, some nerves, but the kids were stronger now and felt that with the fuller security, they would be okay. Shota 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 was counting the teens as they loaded onto the bus and Hisashi Yamada was tagging the luggage and stacking it neatly. The kids from Class 1B were headed to another bus, but ultimately arriving at the same place. Shinso Hitoshi was loaded onto Class 1A's bus, because while he spent time in 1B's class, the move from general studies to hero course and his specific needs at night came at the cost of getting to live with 1A and study with 1B. All right, settle down, 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝐲 warned, or I will make Present Mike Sensei do the announcement. In an enclosed bus, terrified for their ears, the students quieted immediately. Ouch, Mike whispered to 𝐒𝐽𝑒𝑲. He continued, this camp is a good 5 hours away. I am asking one last time if anyone has to go to the bathroom here instead of using the provided latrine in the back. If so, leave at the end of these announcements. After all announcements were given and 2 kids stepped off to use the gym bathroom, the doors closed and the teachers stepped off. Vlad, Aizawa flagged down. Do you have all medications for your students? Vlad checked his own clipboard. Kendo keeps her own epinephrine injectors. Monona takes antipsychotics. That's about it. Easy kids for me. That and Snipe is the one in charge of our meds, but he's on the bus. Aizawa frowned. That seems comically easy in comparison. But oh well. He looked over to see Mike checking the cooler and the extra bag of emergency medications. We have a lot this year, what with the LOV attacks and all. They didn't dare say League of Villains around the kids. I'm bringing the vial and a syringe up top, Yamada said, before closing the bus hatch. They loaded on and were off. The bus traversed hills and lowlands and finally geared up into wooded mountains for the final 3 hours until they were up high and out of sight. The students got out and stretched. They were read out which cabins they were supposed to report to and from there, take their items and set up their beds. Aizawa walked with one group to the shelter and shut the door behind the group. If you have ever been to a camp with Glen shelters, you'll know what kind of cabins these are. Aizawa told the 4 boys that were specifically placed near the med trailer, Shinso Hitoshi, Shoto Todoroki, Izuku Midoriya, and Katsuki Bakugo. You may be wondering why the staff has placed you together. You may be nervous, wondering if the others know. Don't be. You 4 all show signs of post-traumatic stress, and I swear to God, Bakugo, if you're glaring right now, I will take you to the med bay and we will have a talk, Aizawa said, whipping his head around. Should you choose to not behave and take your medications or change into your night briefs, you will be expelled. From UA, Deku cried out, before reading the room. Right, of course. Yes, sir. No trouble here. Shoto shifted uncomfortably and Aizawa looked back to see Katsuki glaring the rest of the boys down. I will be taking everyone else down to lunch. Bakugo, choose your bed and sit. Mike is coming to talk with you. Bakugo said nothing, but finally looked away, out the screen window, like he was uninterested, as the others filed out. Finally, after counting to 11, Hisashi Yamada came in. Whoa, my guy. What's with the attitude? Yikes, Mike said, keeping one hand behind his back. He placed a syringe of Ativan on top of the wooden crate that made up a bedside table. Bakugo stayed silent. Mike sighed. You have to talk. Or what? I'll get expelled, Katsuki shouted, before lowering his voice. These other guys didn't know I wore diapers until Shoto told them. I know he did. And that crybaby Deku. I'm always stuck with him. And who knows what kind of mind control that freak has. Whoa, slow down, Hisashi began. Shoto didn't say anything. Midoriya didn't cry. And Hitoshi knows when to not use his quirk. You're all wet in your beds at night. I'd say it's an epidemic in our dorms. Mike tried to lighten the mood. It did some to lift Bakugo's mood, but not a lot. He was nervous, beyond anything now that he was done being irrationally angry, and he shook, visibly. I don't want to be back, Katsuki whispered. Good talking, Mike said. Do you need to go back? Bakugo rolled his eyes. No, because I'll tell you a secret, Mike said. We're all a little nervous. I was supposed to get this week off, but my husband is here and I'd do anything for him. Your husband? Katsuki asked. Is it Aizawa-sensei? Yep, Mike nodded. It is, and it's our secret because I think you are mature enough to keep it. Can you do that? Bakugo rolled his eyes. Well, you already told me, so I guess. Good. I can keep a secret, too, Mike said, standing up. I have to give you an Ativan shot, but we won't tell any of the other kids that you're getting a boost of calm. Okay, phrased like that, Katsuki couldn't say no. Is it the shot or the pill? Yeah, we didn't think that you'd cooperate, so I already drew the syringe. It's on the crate. He uncapped it and delivered the shot into Bakugo's bicep. Let's go. They made it to lunch and everyone ate before taking a tour of the camp and seeing the rock walls that they'd be practicing hero work on. The only place with actual air conditioning was the dining hall building, where they'd also be studying. They got to change into casual workout clothes and do some team building and challenge courses before it was time for dinner and bed. What do you want to bet they're being incredibly silent and awkward? Aizawa asked Mike. Oh, totally, Mike agreed, as they walked up to turn on the final outdoor lantern on the troubled kids' cabin. But to their surprise, Bakugo was asleep, with his headphones on and MP3 player going quietly, while Todoroki, Hitoshi, and Midoriya were actually discussing their diapers. No, seriously, they're way easier. I just pull them up, Shinso said. No tabs, Izuku asked. Do they leak? Shoto proposed. No tabs. Yeah, sometimes, but I just go before bed. Hitoshi shrugged. Aizawa and Mike looked at each other, surprised. Everyone changed. Mike asked. The group nodded. Katsuki was still asleep. Mike maintained a conversation with the boys and asked them to show the top of the diaper's waistband to prove before letting them get into their sleeping bags. Aizawa nudged Bakugo lightly and handed over a paper cup with some pills and knelt down as Katsuki rolled over to grab his water bottle. "Are you changed?" the instructor asked. Bakugo took the pills and nodded, pushing down the elastic on his pajama pants. Aizawa nodded. "Okay, good night."